Meeting to order. Thanks for being here, everybody, wherever here is today. And looks like we got some exciting stuff on the agenda, moving into some more diverse topics off of the actions, hopefully, if we make it to everything tonight. So let's, Paul, you've got live humans in the room.
All right, I think everybody knows, but please leave through the stairs or the elevator that you came up, or alternatively to my left, far into the hallway. Watch out for all the people here for the library event, so don't trip on them on the way out.
Sounds good.
That's right, Gregory McGuire.
Oh yeah, that's funny. I know his brother.
Really?
Yeah, I've never met him though. Additions, deletions, or changes to the order of agenda items. Anyone have anything that needs adjustment on the agenda? All right, easy crowd tonight so far. So for those in the public, any items not related to the agenda that you would like to bring to our attention, or brief comments that you'd like to make? Yeah, Lori.
Just a quick clarification. During the agenda items, there will be time for public input if desired. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think we've been trying to figure out how to balance this and give public the chance to weigh in while we're going through on things, while still trying to maintain momentum and get through. So if you can stay on topic and to the point, we'd be happy to have your input. So yes,
I totally get it, and I'll try to keep it sealed.
that's fine. But yeah, raise your hand if you have an item, and we'll try to get you in.
Great, thank you.
Sure thing. Anyone else? Okay. All righty. Well, let's dive in then. Looks like the first or the next item up is a discussion about possible actions on recommendations to City Council regarding renewable energy heating system standards. So this is coming out of a discussion that we had. I think it started at the last meeting, although it certainly has sort of bubbled up from time to time before, that basically, given the ICLEI guidance that we had on science-based standards and the high priority for removing, radically reducing anyway, the amount of natural gas that's burned, particularly for heating buildings, that there was a lot of interest among the committee members in advancing some kind of recommendation to the council ahead of the full formal plan to try to get something started along those lines, to make an effort to get that moving, particularly because some of those actions are going to take some steps which have natural lags built into them and might involve things like getting on the ballot in this winter. So, yes, Paul.
Just a quick thing as you're kicking off this discussion, just a very happy coincidence. Just got a heads up today that the City of Burlington is doing an overview and question and answer on the subject of new building ordinances in the City of Burlington, hosted by the Burlington 2030 District and Burlington Electric Department on June 2nd. So encourage anyone who's interested in this exact topic to attend this Q&A and overview. So just thought that would be very pertinent, and I will share it with the whole group.
Thank you. Yeah, that interestingly enough, maybe because I don't know if it's the timing or just didn't come up in the conversation, but neither of the folks that we spoke to from Burlington mentioned that with us. So thank you for bringing that to our attention. So yeah, that I think probably leads into the background that we'll probably get into today, which is that a lot of our thinking is informed by the fact that Burlington has been going through a similar effort over the last year or so. And so Andrew and Michael and I had conversations with both Jack Hansen, who's a counselor in Burlington, who's sort of been the driving force behind that effort in the Burlington City Council, and also with Chris Burns, who runs the energy efficiency program at Burlington Electric, who as a department of the city has been deeply involved in actually implementing that plan. And so they both give us a whole bunch of information about how, what it took to get there, what the different components were, and what they're doing to implement it. So I don't know, I apologize for having sent this out so terribly late, but I did compile the information that we got from those two into a document that I sent around by email to the task force members just this afternoon. So I'm sure no one's probably had a chance to read it, but I wanted you to have that as a reference
Got it.
that we can, hopefully you can pull that up. Sorry for those of you there that you may not have had paper copies. We can certainly put it up on the screen. But I'm certainly going to look at that for, sort of a organization. So, Andrew,
Is it
or
up on the
Michael,
screen now, Ethan? Just
yes,
so
I can.
okay.
Thank you, Paul. So, Andrew or Michael, do you want to talk through this? Do you want me to talk through sort of the high level structure? Actually, Paul, what I see is the agenda.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's a great detailed document, but honestly, I think it's also pretty simple. About a year ago, little less, Burlington did in fact pass an ordinance that's in effect right now that requires all new buildings, residential, commercial, to use renewable energy for their primary heating source. And I think that we should waste no time in doing the exact same thing, assuming that we have the same authority to do so as Burlington has. So I think the gating question should be, gating thing we should do is send the ordinance to our attorneys and ask them to tell us. And if we do, I know Ethan and I would be happy to very soon thereafter present to the council. I think it's just waiting there, low hanging fruit for us to grab, and we should do that as quickly as possible. And then secondly, what Burlington did was this whole charter thing. They needed a charter change to do more than that. They needed a charter change in order to allow them to tax new systems and to regulate existing systems. They got that charter change, and now they're preparing to go to the voters to pass regulations off the back of that change. And we should similarly try and get that charter change and understand the process. They thought they needed to go to their voters first to approve requesting the change. I assume we'd have to do the same. I don't know, but that's the second thing we should do right after the first thing. And so that, I mean, I think that's the simple story.
So
yeah. It would appear that we do have the authority for the ordinance.
I have no idea, Michael.
That was the view of of Chris Burns. He thought that we would have the authority to do so. Obviously, the charter change is another issue altogether.
I mean, maybe it'll be an easy question, but I think we should ask that question.
Can I ask a question of those who did meet with folks in Burlington? Is the ordinance from the authority that this builds off, does it come out of the city of Burlington's building code authority? Okay.
Yes.
I'm not an attorney, but I suspect that the interesting circumstance here will be we don't have building codes otherwise. So could we adopt this without the structure of the rest of the building codes, or would it require us to do building codes? I think we broadly have authority. The question is it like a penny in the pond, or is it a whole mint in the pond to do it? That's, I think,
I think you're exactly right. I was wondering the exact same thing that you're wondering. But I think our attorney should tell us.
Well, I think we can ask you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I mean, if that's the pleasure of the group to do that, I mean, we can go ahead and do that anyway. I think it's an important thing to understand.
So just one thing, I'm sorry, Ethan. The one thing on their ordinance, they decided to just require renewable for new primary heating systems, and they considered, and we discussed with Jack Hansen, also requiring renewables for new hot water systems. Because there are terrific hot water heat pumps, and what he said is they have these like large residential buildings, and it wasn't certain whether like a hot water heat pump would be, adequate if like all 100 families decided they needed hot water at the exact same time, and so they just decided to punt on that. I would honestly love to include hot water heat pumps in our ordinance, and I think we should, on a parallel track, understand whether there really are any concerns, or we write an exemption if someone can establish that it's not practical, then they're exempted.
I think you can also lease them too. So if people, say that they're too expensive.
It wasn't the thing that he indicated, it was that he thought there were just some use cases.
Ethan, could I interject for a moment? Because those of us who are not in the room there can barely hear what's being said. It sounds like everybody's talking from inside a huge garbage can.
We have masks on.
Well, hang on. Is that any better, Michael?
Have somebody else.
Have
Also
Andrew speak. He's the hardest to hear.
Can you hear me?
speak louder.
Oh,
Okay, hang on.
maybe I should come near Paul then.
We can hear you, Ethan, but we can't really understand Andrew.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Well, keep talking. Say a few sentences.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Can I repeat then, because I think it is.
Okay, that's better. Yeah.
That's better, Andrew.
Yeah.
Setting that's coming out of my laptop
Okay.
instead of that.
Let me go back and repeat then. And I'm just, Ethan, if you can just indulge me for a minute.
Yes, please.
What I was gonna say is, what I did say, Ethan did a fantastic job in, detailing and writing down everything we learned, but I actually think it's pretty simple. And I just wanna make sure we convey these really punchy, simple messages. Burlington has in effect and passed about a year ago an ordinance that requires all new primary heating systems to be renewable in all new buildings. I think we should, with all due haste, do the same thing. The first step is to see whether we can do it. And I think that, so maybe, we should take a straw poll on that. Should we ask Paul to ask the attorneys to do that? Aye.
Oh, is that a vote?
Well, I would take a straw poll.
I wasn't sure.
Well, let's sort of go through the options, Andrew, before we have people choose each thing along the way. I think we can probably get to some decisions to
I think it's,
send back.
I don't know if the options yet. It's a gating question. Can we do it or not? Right? Okay.
We'll do-
Then, the second thing is the charter change, right? Burlington also,
Well, sorry, can I just add a couple more things on the, because I want to make sure that people have a clear sense of what we know and don't know about the new construction part of this, to make sure that we sort of have, it's very easy to get confused between the two pieces. So I think it might be useful to make sure that people have a full view of what is the ordinance that covers new construction, and then absolutely, let's move on to
that's what I was just gonna describe it. Okay, good.
the charter change. The thing I wanted to add to the ordinance that we learned was that currently the enforcement for the ordinance is coming from the inspections department, which is one difference. Burlington has an existing, code and inspection department. And so Chris Burns suggested that while that is a difference, there's still some advantage to putting it on the books and getting it out there, even if we don't have a full-blown inspection program. He suggested that we could look into outsourcing part-time, contracting for large projects and work our way up to full-blown inspections. And obviously there's lots of questions about regional inspection collaborations with shared resources and things like that. But that's just another piece of the puzzle that we're going to have to figure out is, do we want to have some kind of plan for how we would actually enforce this new building code, and what would that look like out of the gate, and what's the longer term plan?
Well, although I'll remind folks, right now we've adopted the stretch code for residential energy buildings, and similarly, we have no plan, no means to inspect that, and we don't know whether people are actually doing what they're supposed to do. This is probably in that same vein.
Yeah. I'm not sure with Ethan that Chris, I think in the document the great document that Ethan sent us says it may not be, it's not necessary to have an enforcement capability from day one, but I thought I heard Chris Burns say it is important to have something from day one. It may be not very large because you're not going to have a lot of buildings to inspect from day one, but you need the capability from day one.
Well, and I would reinforce that part of what I heard Chris say was that the builders did not follow things perfectly at the beginning, and that over time, through the reinforcement of being tested on what they claimed, they have learned to follow the rules better, and so that feedback was valuable. And so I think I assume that we want this to be something that has impact and not just something that is a good press release. And so I think this is a consideration we need to make. It isn't necessarily something we have to solve completely to get it on the books, but it is definitely a consideration.
Can I give a little input on this?
Yeah, sure, Lori.
I just wanted to say, as a builder, having been a builder for decades in the region, the Vermont Energy Code, outside of any town that does not have an inspection system, has been worthless for the most part. And I think that doing this is really important. Every time I see a house going up, I just think about the next 50 years of energy that structure is going to consume. So let's do it. Let's find a way to enforce it. Because without enforcement, builders will, Energy Code was supposed to be documented and submitted to the city at the end of every project. And I can tell you that if Paul goes and looks in the record, he will see that very, very few of those were ever done. So it's got to have teeth.
Yeah, thank you, Lori. The other thing that I want to share, again, it's in the document, at least in brief, from our conversation with Chris Burns, was that he really emphasized that while it is possible to get a really good result from cold climate heat pumps, there are a lot of ways to do it wrong. There are units that don't work well in this climate. There are units that are put into buildings that have inadequate shell insulation to really have a good match for the capacity of the heat pump. There's a lot of nuances there, and so
undersized. Well, you said quite a few were undersized.
Right, size for cooling. That's particularly a problem in retrofits, but I think it's a problem in these as well. And so I think, again, if we really want to see this have the effect that we expect, we certainly don't want to find out that the 15% of load backup system is actually carrying 65% of the load in these homes because the system wasn't installed, designed, and commissioned correctly. So, I think there really are some nuances. And again, it's not a reason to not start moving forward to put something on the books, but it's to be aware that we can't simply put something out there and say, switch from gas to electric, and then our job is done.
No,
there will also be, hang on a second, Mike, I'll just say, there's also going to be big pushback because there's concern about affordable housing in South Burlington. And this is going to be putting undue pressure on builders to have added costs. And if there was one place that the ARPA funds could be really effective, it would be in helping make sure that this transition happens and that there are the resources to support it happening.
Agree with that. That's the comment I said to the Energy Committee.
Well, and Chris did describe some of the programs that they had to provide financial support for rental property retrofits and some of these others. And I'll tell you, as someone who's been inside the efficiency programs, on the face of it, as Chris readily acknowledged, you might look at these programs and say, oh, it's double counting, it's free riders, it's too generous, and a lot of that. But the message that I think we got from him is that it has been really helpful to provide some really deep support to make sure that that it doesn't have blowback and negatively impact the low-income customers and a lot of these other problems, right? I think we really need to think about a multi-pronged approach to make sure that Ideally what we'd like to see is in 5 years, this is very standard. It's being done successfully. Everyone's talking about how great it is and how comfortable and great that the homes are to occupy and how low everyone's bills are. Like that would be fantastic. We don't want to set a negative example if we want this to spread.
Just, I think that we actually all know though, that for new buildings, it's actually not more expensive. The big expense is the retrofit for existing buildings. For new buildings, I think all the studies show that, in short order, the efficiency savings outweigh the small additional upfront costs. So I don't think we should be too worried about pushback on new buildings. I think the ARPA funds could come in really handy for retrofit.
Yeah, we may get some pushback because of the design review of a building. The builder has to show how he's going to achieve this result. That 85% of the building's heat requirement will be non-fossil fuel, and Chris Burns pointed out that sometimes when they looked at these calculations, they didn't make any sense, and the builder had to redo it or justify why he thought his numbers were good. And he also emphasized that one of the critical requirements is the shell, the R factor of the shell, and the hermetic nature of the shell of this.
Well, if they're following the building energy standards they're required to follow in South Burlington, that shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah. For new builds.
For new builds, this is all about new builds now, right? For new builds, this should go down, like butter if they're doing what they're supposed to do.
Most builders and mechanics are very resistant to new ways of doing things. And it can be very hard to get a builder who has always put in radiant baseboard or whatever they've used to say, oh, I'm going to adopt this new system. And a lot of work has to be done on the ground floor to get these guys, and especially the mechanical installers who say, you can't do it. You've got to put in a boiler.
Yeah, so we'll have to have some educational. Look, let's first get the ordinance passed.
Well, no, actually,
Little
Andrew, I
step for
think
little feet, right? Little step for little feet.
Well, I mean, I think there is a need for public education too, because there was an architect who posted a beautiful project, and I just, on Facebook, I said, hey, are you doing net zero? He said, only when the customer asks for it. So there's, so no, the answer was no, but if the customer asked for it, we'd get it. So there's a need for education from all angles, to make this happen.
Well,
But honestly, places like Austin, Texas, and a number of cities around the country have been net zero for 5 years already. The only advantage they have is it doesn't get quite as cold there.
Right.
But it gets really hot.
I was just there last week, it was 104, so.
Yeah,
it does get hot.
it's a miserable climate, but it doesn't get very cold. And
A lot more sun.
So can we come back to the ordinance? Is there any disagreement that Paul should ask the attorneys to see if we have authority?
I'll make a motion to that effect, that we're asking Paul to ask the attorneys whether the city has the authority under the current regime to pass an ordinance of this nature.
I second that motion.
any further discussion on the nature of that motion or I mean, I think we can keep talking about the topic, but that does seem like a concrete next step. Folks ready to vote on that?
Yes.
Okay. All in
Aye.
favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, looks like we are
Good.
unanimous. Everyone's in there. Any dissent? I didn't see. Okay.
Just a word, because I was also describing this Burlington decided in their ordinance not to include hot water heat pumps. And they did that according to Jack, has had some unusual use cases. He wasn't certain whether the hot water heat pumps would actually work in a giant building, say where 100 families all wanted hot water at the same time. I don't know if we expect to have that type of thing, and if we do, we can just kind of have a
So-
carve out or exemption. So I would want to expand Burlington's ordinance to include hot water heat pumps in new construction.
So Andrew, let me actually bring up another topic that Chris pointed out to us and that I mentioned in the document, which is that one of the advantages that Burlington had is because they have a municipal utility that runs its own efficiency program. They had a staff of technical experts that were available to them to work through some of these questions. So that's not to say we're at sea and we can't do this, but we need to figure out who we plan to call on for that, right? So to some degree, we can copy and paste from Burlington where we think it's appropriate. To some degree, we can ask for help from EVT, GMP, VGS, or we might decide in some cases that we're not getting the kind of support because they don't feel like they have the mandate and the budget to give us the level of time
We
and
also
effort.
don't necessarily have to figure everything out up front. We can simply write an ordinance that allows someone to reasonably object because the system that would otherwise be required wouldn't satisfy their needs. So I don't know if we need to figure everything out.
Go ahead, Donna.
I think there is a fairly simple answer. The only buildings that are gonna meet those kind of needs, have those unusual needs, are buildings that are gonna be designed by engineers and that do have to go through, CBIS. And, the engineers will just, have to understand that if there's an issue with this, who at the city of South Burlington do we call for exemptions? Because that's a big problem. It's a problem in the CBIS code already, that there's, there's one person at the Department of Public Service you can call and get technical answers to technical questions. But for something like this, it's clearly a need for an exemption. And so they just have to know, who do they ask for that exemption? And what proof do you need that, that a heat pump,
And I
water
think
heater
you can
system
come up
would
with some
work?
words which provides a reasonable exemption.
One of the things that Chris said is that we should take advantage of the skills that are resident in organizations like Vermont Gas, Green Mountain Power, Efficiency Vermont, and perhaps one of the ways we can get some guidance is asking them to put together a group, somebody from each of those organizations to whom we could turn for advice, who can advise us on this program. But he said it's important to get all the utilities and Efficiency Vermont involved in this program.
Presumably, Michael, though, that was for the regulations that will be passed under the charter change, because the ordinance has already been in effect, right? And I mean, that's kind of done and dusted.
No, the ordinance is.
They've got Burlington Electric, which is something efficiency utility, and they had all the skills more or less in-house.
And I wouldn't say that the ordinance is that well underhand. They had it in place in September, and so they've just barely started to see it come in. They have a lot of experience that they're building on from the rental ordinance that had a lot of similar requirements, but just for rentals and slightly different parameters. But I think my concern with not that we need to get everything right, but I look at this as a market transformation problem, right? We're talking about how in a few years we expect that eventually people will get used to this, it'll become standard practice, and it will pretty much run on autopilot if all goes well. But I think there is a critical period, right, of getting over the initial pushback, of making sure that things are well supported, are well explained, that there's financial support if there needs to be for some of these things. When you look at how market transformation works in some of these type of programs, the most effective thing is you put a lot of effort in upfront, give a big push to get things moving in the right direction, and then you can start to dial back that support once it starts to take hold and become standard practice. But I think that there is a risk that if we put it out there and it isn't well thought through and it isn't well supported, we don't have questions answered, we're going to find ourselves on the back foot. And I think if this is the first of several different things that we want to be rolling out to the community, we want to think about how to do it so that the story is consistently, this was a good idea, it was well thought through and supported, it should be successful. And if there's builders or others out there that don't like it, that's their problem. And if what we find is that there's a lot of legitimate, complaints, and we're scrambling around to come up with answers, and there's a lot of exemptions coming along, I don't think I think it's going to be more work for us in the long term, and it's going to slow down ultimately the impact that we want to have. So I think we should move forward as quickly as possible, but I also think we shouldn't wait until things break to figure out how to get them right. And we do have resources that we can pull on, right?
It's critical to make sure you don't have failures at the beginning, because they will tank anything you try to do.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, this is easy to put in place, but it will be easy to reverse too.
Well, I don't know that I would describe it as easy to put in place. The vote of the action to pass an ordinance is a simple action by council, but there is a substantial structure around that would need to be established, even if it's finding the right contacts, building the relationships, having agreements. I don't want to say this is just, put a one pager in front of council and it gets it. And it's
No,
done.
sorry, Paul. I didn't mean to
It's a
suggest
great
that.
piece of this.
Compared to the charter change that's going to require a ballot item and legislative approval, the path to getting there is more in our control. My point is simply that this is something that could be amended easily, and so we don't want to assume that stroke of a
Yes,
pen.
I just don't want to undersell that the political part of passing this versus a charter change is a different scale, but the administrative part behind each of these is very large.
Completely agree.
So I just want to be clear, and it's everybody's job to provide the council with a good game plan going in. I mean, that's.
So I don't disagree either with anything you said, but are you arguing against including hot water heat pumps, or where do you come out?
No. My point about the hot water is that we shouldn't try to figure out the capacity and recharge rate equation among the seven of us. We should take, if we want to start to address things like this, we should start engaging with the technical experts that we have. And if we don't have enough support from, in that case, probably, EVT and maybe GMP, that we could, look into, do we need to hire a consultant or something if we can't get what we need? But I don't think it's something that we should try to answer just with the expertise that's in this room tonight.
Quick question for Paul Connor.
Hillary.
Paul, how difficult would it be for South Burlington to implement a certificate of occupancy program for the city of South Burlington? We issue building permits, but there is no certificate of occupancy. And that would be, if it's easy to implement, a very easy way to have a way to control how these turn out.
Sure. So briefly, we issue a fire department certificate of occupancy for life safety codes for anything that is not a single or two family home or a rental. On the planning and zoning side, for the land development regulations, we issue COs for anything that's not a single or two family home. So basically, single and two family homes don't have COs, the rest does. It's functionally, it's not a massive change, but it would mean that of the, on our side of it, of the 450 to 500 permits we issue a year, if it was all things single family, then that would add about 400 inspections plus a year. So,
but that
350. So it's it's a capacity thing, not a, which is that's not necessarily an obstacle. It's just it's a resource item.
If it's something that's not difficult to do, I can tell you as a builder, having to get a CO will ensure that I do at least the certain things that need to be done.
Well, again, it's not that it's necessarily difficult administratively. It's a question to the, as the budget is put together, is that a good, should that be put in the budget? That's really the question.
I think
I bring it up just because I would suggest that it be part of this ordinance, if this ordinance gets put forward, having a CO offered or issued at the end of a building project for residential properties would be a very easy way to make sure that it's implemented.
I'm pretty sure that's what Chris said they do in Burlington. They do.
Yes, they
require-
do.
You don't get a certificate of occupancy until you've met the requirements of the ordinance and basically proved the calculations.
Well, and those are two different things, though, just to be 100% clear. At least on our side, what Lori is saying is that it's Vermont law that you must submit the building certificate as a self-certification before you get a CO. So this would assure that the self-certification is done. The second half of that would be actually verifying what they are saying in their self-certification, which is that would be additional.
Yep.
That's a whole other capacity question. So
I'd hope that piece would be there too.
So can I bring up in this context, because one of the things that I think, and I know that this is going to work against the desire to, move quickly and have everything in place as soon as possible, but Burlington has this in place already, right? As the biggest little town in Vermont, South Burlington, almost big enough that we can start to debate, are we willing to stretch ourselves to make an investment, to try to put resources in place, to have a more rigorous standard in place for buildings? Once you get beyond South Burlington, at least in this region, I don't see how any of the other towns around here are going to be able to follow in our footsteps of this plan as we put it in place, because you start to get down to needing, 0.2 FTE of an inspector, right? In these very lumpy periods, right? The end of the summer is going to be really busy and there's nothing at all to do in February and stuff like that, right? And so I feel like if the goal is to help, move us all in the right direction, that we should really seriously consider whether a shared set of resources for, a regional, inspection, certification, review, whatever that process is, right? I think it will be more cost effective for each individual community, and it will be far, far more likely that the leadership that we're showing here will result in a much larger impact than just what we can do within our boundaries alone. So I would seriously recommend that we look into that and figure out whether that is worth what is admittedly going to be some extra effort to figure out how to coordinate it.
I don't disagree with you, Ethan, but we need to take a bite that we can easily chew and digest ourselves. That may be a good second step, saying to all the communities in the region, Burlington has done it, we've done it, now we can help you all get together and do it. But trying to do that now, I think is just going to slow us down.
And I know Colchester already does it. They already have certificate of occupancy inspections. And so there are some towns that can piggyback on what we're doing right now. And then that can be the start of momentum.
It's like a contagious disease.
Well, and once all the
Burlington
builders know how to do it, then it's not relearning to build the house in Charlotte.
Yeah, and in some
in the same
cases,
codes, right?
well, and they may change their building systems to meet some of the requirements of the code. And hopefully they're gonna start using less carbon intensive materials for insulation, because it's cheaper, do it that way.
Look, I don't know, my perspective is we need to get the ordinance on the books and inspections could come.
Yep.
And if in the first couple of years, some builders do it and some don't, because they're learning, like, that's not a bad transition period too, and we can worry about inspections in 24, 25, but we need to get the ordinance on the books.
Yeah, quickly.
And then we need to do a charter change.
Yeah, we need, so can we then,
So
can we
let's,
move to
yeah,
that
let's move
then? To that, so I do think at the same time, we should, gear up to put this on the ballot.
So Andrew, let's go back a step here, because not everyone has the privilege of the benefit of the conversations that we've had. So let's take just a minute to fill folks in on the charter change. So basically the ordinance covers new buildings, right? It piggybacks under this code inspections authority that already exists for Vermont cities and towns,
And it's just residential or is
No,
it also
it's all-
commercial?
it's all-
also commercial,
Okay,
but it's just new buildings.
okay.
For existing buildings, Burlington needed to do something different. And so what they did was they passed a charter change to grant Burlington the authority to regulate thermal energy systems in residential and commercial buildings. I'm reading from their language, including assessing carbon impact or alternative compliance payments. They did caveat that no assessment of carbon impact or alternative compliance payments shall be imposed unless previously authorized by a majority of legal voters.
Oh, that's,
So,
now I remember.
right. So here were the steps as we understand them. The voters passed a ballot item that triggered a review by the legislature. The Vermont legislature approved the charter change for Burlington and the governor signed it. And one of the reasons why the governor was willing to sign it was because the financial payments couldn't happen without a second vote by the voters.
Right.
It had to be explicitly authorized after that. Then the charter change was in place. That just gave Burlington the permission to regulate. It didn't actually start regulating anything. Last week, the council now passed a new resolution. I think at this point, they still haven't started regulating, but they have instructed BED to start working on setting up the rules for it. If I remember correctly,
Yeah. They wanted by July the 18th.
Right. So it is possible to get the charter change without having the voters pass a ballot initiative first. But the only way for that to happen is if the legislature independently of its own volition decides to take up the item and grant us the authority to change our charter. So we could skip the ballot step if we thought that there was desire in the legislature to just, and I think it would probably not just be for us. I suspect if the legislature did it independently, they would probably pass and say, all towns or towns meeting these criteria can do these things if they want to.
Well, I think the legislature is on the hook, given the state's climate action plan. They probably wouldn't be able to resist a strong request to allow the charter change, because it would be counterproductive to what the state wants done.
Well, there's two different things though, right? So one is if we vote on it and send it to them, it certainly seems likely that they would not stop it, given that they passed it for Burlington.
Mhm.
If we get our voters, a majority of our voters to approve the charter change, the legislature will probably let it go through if it looks like Burlington's. I can't, assert to that. I'm not sure how likely it is that if we say, hey, can you put this on your agenda for next year to just do this without having gotten the voters to demand it. If the voters demand it, the legislature has to address it. They might reject it, but they have to look at it. So we could certainly ask our local reps
Yep.
whether they think that there's enough desire and whether anyone in
So
the
Ethan-
legislature is willing to take that up, but I don't know.
Ethan, if I can just sort of jump in on that.
Yeah.
I'm not aware of any time historically when the legislature has done a local charter change without it starting at the local level. They would look at something statewide or look at a voter approved charter change.
Yeah.
I can't think of a circumstance where the legislature has of their own volition changed a local charter.
I was certainly, I had in mind that it would be statewide if we asked them to do it without a ballot first. Obviously, they can't just do it for one town, but it would make sense to do it because it fits in with the climate action plan, the states.
Given the current climate, so to speak, it's hard to believe that they wouldn't, with appropriate nudging, be willing to take this up.
I agree.
Talk to the
Look, they
governor
might,
about
but I
it.
think that nonetheless, we should plan to put it before our voters too. And if we get lucky and the state moves at the speed of light, that'd be awesome.
So has anyone looked into the process for putting an item on the ballot? I think when we talked about this in the past, we were under the impression that it could either go on the primary ballot in whatever that is, August or
August 9th.
or November on the midterm.
Well, a
So the
ballot
council-
item has to, the city council agrees to put a ballot item on the ballot, or you can get, I don't know, some percentage of voters to petition.
10%.
Is it 10%
I think so.
of the registered voters,
Yeah.
right? Or is it the population?
It's registered
I think it's the registered voters, and I'm not sure whether in the instance of a charter change, whether the city's charter committee has to review it and recommend it, or whether that's just advisory to council. I'd have to look at the,
Yeah, I don't know that
whether,
either.
because we do have a city charter committee that typically an item is referred to, to review and give a recommendation to council.
Well, I
But
mean,
that doesn't take months. I mean.
Right, no,
that
I'm
could
just
be-
saying procedurally, and then.
Procedurally, it could be a meeting or two.
Right, and then the elections at which that could take place could be the primary in August, the federal election in November, or town meeting day in March of next year. Those are the next three coming up.
do you know what the deadlines are for adding items to those ballots?
Believe it's no less than, oh, I'm thinking about the budget of 30 to 40 days. It's
Well, I
Isn't it
think-
45 days?
Yeah, I think it's 30 or 40 days.
something
Really?
like that, and that's for the council to approve the official wording that would go on there, so
Uh-huh.
it backs up from there, that's the last day.
Right.
Right.
So it needs to be, vetted for, being language that's very clear to the voters. It needs to be, obviously, the council would need to be on board at that point, so. August comes quickly.
Yeah,
August
think
is
you-
really next week.
there might be some rules around calling public hearings for charter changes. You might have to do several official public hearings before it's approved by the select board or the city council. Sorry.
Yeah, I'd personally be a little worried about putting it on in August because as the
Me too.
primary election for a midterm, it's a pretty low profile election. And I mean, maybe that plays to our favor and that this would be something that would draw people out and that helps to get voter turnout, but it seems more likely that aligning this with one of the more prominent elections might be better. But I don't honestly know the strategy and probably the first question is just, what are all the steps? How long do we think it's going to take? And frankly, just starting to socialize this with the city councilors to see what the feedback is about how enthusiastic everyone is about passing this, what their concerns might be. I don't know.
Oh, look, on that front, what Burlington's charter change does is two things. It gives them the power to regulate thermal energy systems, and it gives them the power to tax. And what Jack said is that, almost all of the pushback was on the latter thing, the power to tax. And I've been the strongest supporter of carbon tax my whole life. But what Jack said was he thought they can get 95% of what they need to do with the first prong. They can just say, look, anytime that you change out a furnace, you need to replace it with a renewable energy, heat pump or something. And that would, basically get them where they need to be without having to impose a carbon tax. And he cautioned us to think really carefully about whether we want to go for both of those things or just one of those things.
So Andrew, were you clear on it? Because I heard that as well, but it wasn't entirely clear to me what the enforcement mechanism was on a rule like that, because I have to assume that if there's not a fine imposed, that it would simply be that the permit would be denied. Is that your impression as well?
Yeah, I mean, again, we have a problem with enforcement. I get that. I know that. We all know that, and we got to figure that out. And so it's a big problem, and this will be part of that problem.
So, yeah, I think there's still a lot of questions about exactly how this gets rolled out, because I also heard from Chris that they, as much as it would be convenient to enforce it through requiring that whenever you replace a gas boiler, it has to be with a heat pump. And he didn't think that they were going to go that direction because he thought that was too politically unpopular. So if we're not going to tax them for keeping them in there, we're not going to require them to be replaced. We're just going to say you have to do this unless you don't want to. And we already anticipate that the community is not going to want to. I mean, I'm all for feeling good, but we could just write it on a piece of paper and be done and not have to trouble anyone with it, right? We need to figure out some kind of mechanism that the folks who don't want to will want to.
I'm not sure that he said they won't go that way. I think he was pointing out to us that it is fraught.
Look, all this is fraud. You're getting people to do stuff in their best interest that they otherwise wouldn't do. But that's what we're here for, right? We're here to push and lead. And so, I mean, I don't know, we can't at this table, you know, be paralyzed by all the things that can go wrong, right? I mean, let's, you know, we'll deal with it as it comes, you know, we'll figure it out.
Yep.
Is there a way to create both carrot and stick? And it brings me back to the ARPA funds or some other mechanism, whether it's Efficiency Vermont, et cetera. But the ordinance says you have to do this, or the charter change says you have to do this. And we also have some sort of incentive in place to help.
There's state
Absolutely.
and federal.
And
I mean, they were
and
already
maybe
in
city.
place.
Yeah, no, I mean, there is some, but that's exactly right, Lori.
And
I mean,
at this
but
point-
those are implementation steps. Like, I think we'll figure it out. You know, we'll figure it out. Let's get the ordinance and the power, and then we can work on all these steps.
It's true, Andrew, but it's also true that there are multiple paths we can go down, and part of what our responsibility is to figure out which one
What's the other path? What's the other path?
Well, there's the carrot paths we're on now of incentivizing them. We could look into, can we make gas more expensive? You know, we could, there are a bunch of different paths we can go down.
I mean, there's two things. You can either regulate or tax, right?
Yep.
So,
Right, which is,
and the only question is whether in the charter change, we want to ask for both or one.
Yeah.
If this moves forward and you know,
let's
that
not
there's going,
the roadblocks now. Let's cross those bridges or knock those roadblocks down when we get to them. I think we're going around in circles here. We've agreed that we will we'll get some legal advice about what authority we have, and if we have the authority, we will then go along to develop an ordinance and ask the city council to pass it.
No, hold on, Michael. This is really important because I think if we go to the city council on this, we should go as a package. So we've already agreed on the ordinance, but on the charter change, I really think we on this committee need to think about whether we would ask the voters or ask the council to both regulate and tax or just regulate. I think it's a political question, it's a strategic question. It's a really important question that I think we should decide on here. Because when we go to the council, we should be asking council, look, pass this ordinance and go to the voters on this charter change. And what are we asking the charter change to say? It's a really important question that we need to resolve.
I wasn't saying that we shouldn't do that, the second thing. I was just saying.
What is the second thing? Is the second thing
is the charter change.
No, I know, but what's the charter change say? Does it, again,
regulate and tax?
Okay.
So you want to do both?
You say regulate and there's going to be significant pushback, at least from one. You know, we know that tax piece is gonna. I'm happy to go there too. I don't know. I'm interested in Helen's sense too on this.
It's hard to predict what the council will do. I think, you know.
Well, and I think, you know, this will be a conversation for both you and then ultimately the council. The council can pass what it chooses to pass. Ultimately, the voters need to pass something. And Burlington has, and we can benefit from that to a certain extent, has spent the last decade really building up the case for renewable energy. I think a political question for you all and for the council is South Burlington going to be in that place in 3 months, 6 months, 9 months to be able to both understand and pass something like that. And that's not something that I can answer, but I think it's an important question because you certainly don't want a ballot that doesn't pass. That puts you back a while for sure.
And I think similarly, there's some concern about putting a charter change in place, taking it through the ballot, the legislature, all of that rigmarole, and then 4 years later coming back and going, you know what? We're not getting us where we need to go. We need to add the ability to tax. Now we're going to do another ballot item and another round through the legislature. And I mean, again, it's not impossible, but it's just a question of, Burlington sort of did a middle ground and they said, we want the ability to tax if we get this additional level of buy-in. And so give us a provisional ability to tax, but don't give us the full ability to tax.
Yep, they did.
Right, and as you note, Ethan, that was the reason that the governor ultimately signed it was because of that second piece. So that's
Yeah.
a second consideration in there. If we have the same legislature next year, how will the legislature feel? How will the governor feel? And if the governor didn't support it, how strong is the support in the legislature to override, which is a big deal.
Well, we just had a straw poll on this, right? So the fossil tax that just tried to go through, right? The clean heat standard had more than 2/3 support in both chambers.
But they could not override the veto.
They couldn't override the veto,
By
right?
one vote.
By one vote.
In the Senate?
No, in the House. It
Really?
started in the House and it was.
3 Democrats in the House voted against overriding.
Wow,
Yeah.
that stinks.
It does.
Now-
Names, addresses, and phone numbers.
Smiling today.
Yeah. I
Now
mean, it's
is
sort
the
of
So
in-
can
time.
I ask a question?
Sure.
So we know our little group is very interested in doing this. And I think we need to be very clear on what is it we need to know in order to push this forward. We need to get a legal opinion, right? So somebody's going to talk to the town lawyer. We need to look at the schedule for if we're going to put something on the ballot, when it needs, what's the timeline for August, for November, et cetera. And maybe we need another meeting with Burlington as we talked more about this or not. I mean, I'm not sure, but I think we need to be clear on what's the information we need in order to go forward. We want to go forward, but we don't want to be stupid about it and then sink the deal for the next 5 years. So how fast can we talk to the lawyer? Can we get some information, more information on paper? I either didn't get your late email or it's in with 5 million other affordable housing emails. But anyway, I haven't seen it, so I will read it today.
Apologies. Yeah,
No, it's mine.
let me know. I'll resend
It's
it.
a crazy time right now.
Sure. So
And
yeah, I
this
think
movement is going to require a lot of public outreach, which
Yep.
can happen pretty quickly if we put our mind to it.
Well, do we have any resources available to us as a task force, for example, to hire a consultant who could plan that campaign? I mean, zoom it up, not spend a year in meetings, but I mean, there are people who do this kind of thing all the time, you know.
You're talking about developing the
Watts
message,
is
get the
somebody.
messaging right, and it has to
Yeah.
be, yeah, you're right. It has to be fast and it has to be very focused.
yeah, and I mean, I think there are a bunch of pieces, and I started to put some of them in this document. Some of them I've sort of left as questions, but I think that we need to have sort of a comprehensive story in there that explains why is this so important? You know, why is it necessary to do this at this time? What kind of impact is it going to have if we do it? What kind of costs, is it going to have, and how are we going to help to address those costs? And what kind of benefits might be in there to balance out the costs? And a detailed explanation of how it's all going to work, right? Because I think some of the strongest opposition, right? There's a lot of people who might not really care about this, right? They don't think it's going to affect them, or they're not that worried about it. But there are some people who are, they're in the industry, and so that they know this is going to be a direct impact, that they're going to have to go figure it out, and maybe it's going to cost them some jobs or some money, and so they're willing to fight against it. And so we need to have information ready to try to assuage some of their concerns, and also information ready to bring out people who might be willing to put some effort into helping to support us with it, right? So I think just
So
having
did,
the
did
phrase.
Burlington have marketing material and did they do a campaign? I guess we didn't ask that question, or maybe you did subsequently.
No,
I
it's a
think
good point, I did.
BED's been doing a lot for
Yeah,
quite a few
I mean, so
years.
we should get whatever material they put out when they put their thing on the ballot.
Okay, so who's gonna do all this? Who's gonna get their material and who's talking to the lawyer? And let's giddy up on this.
So,
I think I see Lori volunteering.
I'll help out.
Yay.
so staff is gonna talk with the city attorney. If folks are interested in looking at a scheduled timeline for a charter change, we can certainly do that. In terms of Darylyn's question about resources, that's a city manager and city council call about assignment of resources. That lives with the city manager to do that. And if it's something within the existing budget, then it can be done. If it's something that is a modification from, then that would be through with some council.
I think if we get Burlington materials, if they haven't, could leverage off them, I'm pretty confident that there's a group out there that might be able to market this pretty well, so.
Oh, gee. And the IPCC has put together a lot of very powerful materials for us.
Yeah.
There's a lot of materials, yes.
And if the time isn't now, it's never, because look at our weather today.
Mhm.
Yeah,
This isn't something that can sit around and wait.
nope.
And in reality, if you're gonna talk to the builders, the people who are most affected by it, there's not that many of them. You know, the big contractors, you don't have to worry about them. They already know how to do all this. It's the home builders, the ones that, you know, don't necessarily fill out the paperwork. There's probably less than 10 in the whole city building houses right now.
And to some degree, it's
There aren't
other
that
folks.
many.
It's other folks in the trades, right? So I talked to a plumber who was doing some work on my house that I've worked with a number of times in the past. And he does a lot of work in Burlington. And I talked to him last year when some of this stuff was out there, and he was, you know, absolutely distraught at the idea that we were going to move to heat pumps and there was going to be no need for plumbers anymore, because what he heard was electric heat, and he thought we were going back to strip heat resistance, and it was taking all the work away from plumbing and going back to electrical, which is, of course, the complete opposite of what we're going to, right? We're doing
Right.
more plumbing work. So, you know, I think there's a whole range, particularly as we get into talking about existing buildings and doing retrofits, right? If we actually think that people are going to replace existing fossil fuel systems with heat pumps, it's really going to take a transition, because you can't replace on burnout unless you're really ready to go, right? Unless the builders understand that, like, and the contractors understand that's what's going to happen. Because what happens today is you call up in the middle of the night and you say, my furnace is dead and my house is at, you know, is 50 degrees and it's going down. You're not putting in a heat pump at that point. There's no way you're going to get a heat pump in.
Months to get them right now.
And you're also getting ahead of the technology, because whole house systems are just barely starting to come on the market.
Mitsubishi makes a terrific whole house ducted hyperheat system. I've been reading a lot about it, and there's some really good positive reviews.
But they're new. It's on the very edge of what people know.
Yep.
And we also have a lot of hydronic systems in this part of the world, right? Baseboard hot water systems.
Yeah.
And there are, you know, and Michael, I know you and I have been talking about solutions to those, but those are even more cutting edge, and you know, there's no one around here.
One of them is very cutting edge, but one of them is an established business, but it's probably very expensive.
And in terms of getting anyone to put it in, just speaking as someone who's had multiple plumbers walk away from working with me when I tried to get them to even talk about this, it's not going to be easy. So I think, and none of this is to say like, oh, this is futile and we should give up. It's just to say, we cannot write something down on paper and assume that the whole community is going to fall in step and everyone's going to say, oh, I'll just take out 3,000 more in loans. Oh, I'll just retrain myself and get a whole bunch of new equipment. Like, oh, I'll just learn all your new
No,
technology.
but there's gonna be a transition period. right? There'll be a transition period where people learn to do this, they learn from each other, they realize over a few years they need to do it, how they do it. And you know, the few buildings that we may miss in that couple of years, not really an important thing. It's
No, totally
really
agree with
the leadership and getting it on the books.
The transition period is not a passive period, though. Someone is going to have to support through that period.
Yeah.
So maybe we think EVT is going to do all that work, and that might be true, but we need to know what the resources are to support through that period. Sorry, Darlene. Go
Okay,
ahead.
so it's now 8 o'clock. We've been talking about this for an hour. And my concern is that we have all these other sections to go through, but we also need, I think because of what we've just been saying, we need to talk about the outreach effort. Are we actually, I mean, I have some questions and we can just put them on the wall and come back to them. But if we're going to go out and do surveys and online surveys and stuff, people don't know what we're talking about. If we put these charts up anywhere, people would go, I don't know what those people are talking about. They're all nuts. I mean, if we put our flow sheet online, do you think anybody would know what we've been talking about? What a beautiful sunset. So the way in which we communicate about what we're doing, we are getting to that point where we have to know how to do this. If we're actually going to go out and solicit responses and do a poll and I don't know what else is in there. I know you don't want to talk about that now. It's not the place on the agenda. But when we talk about it, we need to talk about how we're going to sell this point that we're very strongly involved with. Because that's the problem.
Darryl, I think
Everything we're
we'll get
doing.
there. I think we'll be able to do it. Look, let's finish these actions. You know, as Lori said, there's so much material out there that we can package and wrap
Yes.
all of these actions around. I'm confident we'll do it. We'll do it.
Yeah,
Even if we have to hire a marketeer, a marketing expert to help us with this messaging, but
I don't think we'll have to do
we'll
that.
get it done.
I'm enthusiastic. I want to see this go forward. I just want to temper our expectations by the amount of time and money and effort that Efficiency Vermont has spent trying to make this happen over the last 5 years. And that's good for us because.
But they've just done it through persuasion and marketing. That's why we're going to put some teeth on the books.
And there is ARPA money. We need to,
Yep.
we could get people to devote some ARPA money to this. Because the city council was doing that outreach to get people's opinions on ARPA. And if we could tag it in with what we want to do and say, here, you got to help people get.
Yep.
Are you
There's also state money. I mean, there's
That's
probably
federal, no, I mean the
millions of
one-time
dollars.
federal money.
I know, but there's also millions of dollars. in
Yes, and there's
several
state money.
buckets
I mean,
to
what else
deal
is
with
there?
climate change. So
Yes,
we are trying to work on it, right? So I think there's some opportunities for funding.
yes.
Well,
So
I think we should move on. I think
Okay.
looking into some of the funding. So just so we make sure we've captured what's going on here, there's a couple questions. It sounds like we're going to go track down answers to in terms of logistics and, you know, legal authority and things like that. And it sounds like there may also be some work that should be done in terms of getting technical support, getting, you know, outreach support, some of those things. Is anyone volunteering to go and find out more information about what kind of resources we could get to figure out all the details that we want to have in place?
Donna, do you know about that?
Honestly, I don't think we need to resolve that right now. Can we
Okay.
move on to the next agenda
Yeah, I
item?
think we need
Let's
to,
hear from the lawyers
we need to really.
and we'll have,
Yeah, let's
we'll
find
have
out if we can
6
even
months,
do it.
8 months, 9 months to figure all that out.
I'd like to
Is
see
there any
this.
motion on a charter change?
Well,
I
We didn't
I
have
think
a
that,
motion.
I think the next question, we were going to ask the lawyer some questions and some timing questions. Did we need to take a motion on something before we find out what the logistics are?
You took a motion to get them to find out the logistics on the ordinance.
Right.
You need to take a motion to get them to find out the logistics on the charter change.
But Paul said they would do that. I mean, but
So I guess I was seeing head nodding, so I'm comfortable in proceeding with both of those,
Right.
unless anybody disagrees.
Just trying to be clear on that. Thank you.
Did we settle the question of whether it was going to be regulatory only or regulate and tax?
Well,
We
why
did
don't you
not.
ask him both?
Yeah, the question is for both.
Right.
I mean, we're asking the question,
well, no. That's not a legal question. That's a political question.
but we're asking the question.
Right,
No,
the
no,
question,
we're
the
not
question
asking
is
that
about,
question to the lawyer. It's not a legal question. It's a
so,
political
so
question.
my understanding that maybe this is worth making sure that we understand correctly. The question that we're asking is, what are the steps that we need to take in order to get a charter change enacted, right? What are the next steps we need to do? Who needs to do what? What are the deadlines for it? Right?
Right.
We just need to understand
But
what.
we're not asking the lawyers the substance of the change. That's a political question.
Right.
It's a question for us to first make a recommendation. It's a political question for the council.
Yeah, and let's find out what the lawyer says
Right.
about the ordinances and
Okay, yeah, so we
the
can,
process for the charter change.
we
and
can
then
all get mull over the substance of the charter change and maybe talk a bit more next time. I think it's a difficult question, honestly.
It is.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay, so to Darylyn's point, that was a 5-minute item that ran over a little bit. Um,
Can't you see why sometimes the city council goes until 11 PM? Isn't that right, Helen?
Correct.
We're very jealous. We are emulating you. So I guess
Where's my-
the next item on the agenda is to continue reviewing the pathways and actions before we get to the community outreach plan. Let's see if we can make our way through the actions, and let's try to leave enough time to make at least some progress in the outreach plan, because I know that that's time sensitive and overdue. Is that okay with everyone if we keep going, just checking in because we're so off schedule?
Can you put it up on the screen?
Yep.
Please.
And do you want to share that or do you want me to share it?
I can do it if you want me to.
Okay, let me just give you the permission.
So, since I wasn't here at the last meeting, I did want to make a comment on,
Somebody is echoing, is it? Can somebody check?
Let me see. Should we all turn off? Oh, she's muting us. Okay.
so I guess you got through the R1 elements, but I found that there was one very, very big issue that was
Can
completely
you make that
missed.
bigger?
Or is it possible to maybe hide some of the columns so that
So
we can just see
the
column
draft actions, yeah.
J
Jay.
and the comments, I guess? I'm gonna have to move closer to you, but.
Yeah, you can just keep zooming in. There's a lot of room to zoom in still.
Keep zooming.
Keep going, keep going.
I can't- I
Because
can't
it's
even-
really next to impossible to read it.
Now I can
Now it's starting, now I'm starting to be able to read it,
Yeah.
but I actually brought a copy with me too, and my glasses, so.
All right, and I think you
You
can
have
probably
your-
hide leaders. If you don't mind.
Yeah.
All right, that's probably, is that?
That's good.
workable?
That's good.
I can read that from way back here.
Can everyone hear me sitting in this spot?
Yeah, because you're.
No.
Yeah, but you're the same distance from the.
So the
Yes, we
one thing
can.
I wanted to point out was in all of the R1 sections, it was, wind energy was overlooked, and wind energy is certainly applicable to industrial parks. You know, there's several areas in the city where there are industrial parks where there already is small scale solar, or not solar, wind energy. And, you know, one wind turbine generates as much energy as an acre full of solar panels on a good day. And they operate at different times. And so I don't see why we would not include wind energy. Potentially just add it to R 1.1. But
To
be spec-
require.
No, but specifically as an
What would you
alternative.
say? What would you say?
It's an alternative.
What would the word say?
To require qualified new buildings to be built with solar and or wind net metered system. Well, no, I guess,
So if someone didn't want to do solar and they wanted to do wind,
yeah, it's an alternative to solar. I mean, they're both applicable, but some, it worked better in some sites than others.
I mean, I think you're right. If someone is going to invest in wind, they probably want to invest in solar too. It's not very cost effective to do both at once.
Right. It would be either or. But certainly leave that as an option for people. And there's people that might be concerned about people putting them in residential areas. So I thought you might want to make it specifically for commercial applications or industrial sites, industrial applications.
Well,
I mean, ultimately, just to be clear, as we did touch on this briefly last time, the city doesn't get to regulate. We can regulate possibly whether a portion has to come from renewable, but we don't have the authority to regulate the installation of any form of power generation facility, the way in which it takes place. That's Public Utilities Commission. So we can certainly have input on it, but we don't get to regulate that.
Yeah, and so you might have people objecting, say, oh, I don't want wind turbines in my neighborhood. Well, we're talking about appropriate applications here.
Chittenden County is not a great location for wind. If you look at the wind maps.
Well, it may not be perfect for a very, very large system. But there's a small system that sits in a very, very bad location for wind, but they still generate more energy than they can use
So
with it. So,
in the interest of moving on, Anne has suggested or other renewable net metered systems. Is that good?
That-
I don't
Yes.
want to.
That
Good.
works just fine.
Okay.
That
Thank you,
does-
Anne.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So on item 1.3, how did we resolve that question about the requirement to have a certain, it was like 70,000 megawatt hours or something? Did we?
So you asked the Regional Planning Commission to look to see how much rooftop /
Yeah.
parking lot capacity exists.
Yes.
Melanie said that the RPC could do it, but it wouldn't be immediately.
Okay,
That they needed
so
some-
we're gonna assume that this is good and we may have to revisit it?
I think that it will depend on what the answer is. If the answer is you can only get 30% that way,
Yeah.
then I think the next question becomes
I get it. Well, we may
Somebody
have to.
needs to mute.
What is
I think
that?
that's me. I think it's me.
I think it is, we could hear you
Yeah,
type.
that's you, Ann. Then the question becomes, do you want to follow the Act 174 guidance and have
I think we want to.
substantial deference? In which case you might have to make some hard decisions of saying these greenfield areas should be renewable energy,
Yeah.
or do you not pursue
Well,
it?
maybe the
because you don't
Horn
have-
Farm thing will be successful.
That would be wonderful.
Yeah.
Well,
Okay,
you could have something that just says for the implementation plan that they will examine these or assess them. And I don't think we should spend a whole lot of time on this point.
well, I
we-
think the key question, Darrellyn, from now till say the end of this project is it the recommendation of this group to have a plan that meets the state enhanced energy plan or
Yes,
not?
I've read your notes about that. And
Honestly, I think it makes sense in 1.3 to say it is the intent to meet that. And as you said, we have to revisit whether that sentence does it.
yes,
well, I think the question that Paul's asking is, do we send the CCRPC off? And if they do the analysis and come back and say 20% of it needs to go on, ground mount in natural spaces, that we have given them the authority to make that decision, or?
I think we'd come back and I think as a group we discuss, honestly, if that's what's needed, I would probably say
right,
yes.
because ultimately, and this may not be the job of the Climate Action Task Force, but if a portion of the energy does need to come from areas that are not rooftop, then the city will need to, right, will need to identify potential locations that it then supports through the regulatory process. So at some point, whether that's the planning commission, this group, a special group would need to identify that as part of the plan if that was the intent. So I think it doesn't have to be answered tonight,
That's
but
fine.
that's coming at some point, and somebody will have to not just say we want to do it, but how are we gonna do it?
Right.
Can I just ask, what is meant by do not currently provide environmental services?
Yeah, so I was thinking of the whole panoply. So carbon sequestration, you know, wildlife, habitat for pollinators, areas to absorb water, to filter air, you know, the whole panoply of things that our natural spaces provide to us.
Is it okay with everyone to leave it like that? It just seems.
It
that
doesn't
might
make,
be-
I don't think, I didn't even understand what he meant by that.
No, I don't think it's obvious.
Now that I know, but yeah, it's not
Yeah.
obvious from that language.
There's probably a way to add another sentence, but.
I'd say environmental benefits instead of services.
Okay,
At least we'll kind of get the general idea.
yeah.
I think it's just as clear to list them,
I do too.
including, you know,
I do too, Helen. I think.
it's not,
Yeah.
you know, I mean, we're not trying to make this fit on a
Right.
dime. You
This is not-
wanted
We're
to
trying to squeeze it into.
So
these
again, it's
little box on
habitat,
this Spreadsheet.
wildlife,
50 words or less.
pollinators, nesting birds, water filtration, you know, absorption of water runoff to prevent flooding, air
You can-
filtration.
You can name a couple such as, but not limited to.
Yeah.
Yes,
Here's
exactly.
the example, or you can be exhaustive. That's just
Perfect, Helen.
happy
Perfect.
with me.
Okay.
And I think the only thing I would add there, and or is demonstrated to be compatible with. As Michael alluded to, there's an application in front of the city right now for a vertical solar array that would go to be specifically work with farming, for instance. Maybe somebody will find a technology where it works extremely well with any one of these things.
Right.
Probably hard with forests, but
Yeah.
but I'm not an expert.
Right,
Put the solar on top of the trees.
exactly. Oh, then the FAA would complain because hurt the pilot's eyes.
So I
Okay.
believe you were at N 1.1. You had covered R 1.4 unless anybody had something that they wanted to modify on that.
No.
So I think that you left off at N 1.1 with a spirited discussion at the end of the last meeting.
That's right. And then Andrew sent us his correction of that,
Revision.
your revision.
Yep.
So that's what we're dealing with.
Is that what's on the right-hand column right now?
Yeah. not
Yeah.
Highlighted.
Yep. Well, no, that was your previous revision. Then you sent another one, Andrew.
No, that's it right there.
Oh, okay.
And I guess we were also waiting, and I don't know if it's available, but for the Natural Resource Committee recommendation?
He sent it. But Andrew, I'm talking about your email of May 6th.
This is it.
Yeah, this is it.
That's it.
Oh,
That's it.
exactly, word for word. Yep.
That's it.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. Never mind.
So one question I had about this piece is there going to be some more explicit measurements and metrics about the capacity? Because it varies based on the type of the type of habitat, the type of, a forest. A hardwood forest is very different from a softwood forest, which is different from a scrubby forest, which is different from a meadow with trees. some trees, which is different from just a grass. They're all different. And I'm not sure how you put metrics on all of those with this general statement.
When you say metrics, what do you mean?
How much carbon
much-
sequestration are
yeah.
you getting? Because it's a general, it's
Get
very,
that.
it's a,
Oh,
but because
oh,
inevitably, each
well.
of these things are going to have to be measured in terms of
So this is
how
not
much
just about
contribution.
carbon sequestration. At least in my mind, it's not. That's not why I'm suggesting it.
Well,
it's-
if it has,
it's-
then what does it have to do with carbon? What does that even have to do with climate change then? If you're not identifying what it does to
Well,
carbon
it's-
dioxide?
it's-
The sequestration is what this is about.
It is and it isn't. As the climate changes, flora and fauna are gonna have to migrate. Floods are gonna get more intense. Arable farmland is gonna become more and more valuable. Local farming is gonna become more.
Yeah, but you're putting,
more important.
this is a climate, this is a climate action plan, and we're trying to numerate the benefits of this. And so I think you need to be specific.
This is about.
You need to
right
be
now we're in the
specific
climate
about what you're
resilience.
protecting and how much carbon, effect.
Again, Don, in my
there
mind, this
is.
is not just about carbon. This is about climate resilience.
Which is what it
That's why,
says.
that's why I'm
There are,
suggesting.
So
look,
if I,
there are some metrics that can be given as examples. You don't have to give a metric for every single item on here, but there are metrics about how much carbon a certain acreage of forest will sequester. There's probably the same metrics for grasslands. Obviously, they're average.
But we're not doing that, right? Didn't we decide we're going to use the metrics for transportation, land use, and thermal? Because that's most of what happens, and we're not going to factor everything, or are we? Are we actually going to say,
I didn't think we were gonna try and benchmark, how much carbon our forests sequester today and how much incremental they can sequester. I had understood
I don't think we're gonna
from
do
Melanie,
that.
and unless I'm wrong, that's kind of
You're
maybe beyond the scope of this.
It is beyond the scope.
I think, can we just adopt the revised wording here and then move on?
Yeah, I don't think we're gonna resolve this question tonight, so we probably have to move on.
I think that the only question that I would have, and this comes to metrics potentially in some place, is the word fully protect.
Yeah, fully, yeah. That's
Yeah.
And,
a
because
tough word.
all right,
It seems different from what we've talked about in other places where we want to set metrics to figure out how to weigh the climate consequences of decisions with other decisions so that we can try to optimize for that. And
Like what, Ethan?
like what else besides climate change matters to people in South Burlington?
But we're a climate change task force.
Right, but we have been trying to balance lots of things, right? We're not suggesting that we should shut down all car traffic in South Burlington, although that would
Trying
certainly.
to
maximum.
satisfy the ICLEI science-based targets that satisfy the Paris Accord without regard to, so far the economic costs. I think it's doable. I think we should do it. I don't remember that conversation. I
But the,
remember us trying to get to the science-based targets.
I think if we're talking about ICLEI and science-based targets in Paris, we're talking about carbon. And what you were just saying to Donna was that we need to worry about adaptation as well as mitigation. I don't think adaptation is very well covered by Paris or ICLEI, where I think you're trying to bring it in here, which I appreciate. Adaptation is valid in this. I'm just saying that I think that in all of these items, we've tried to balance and say, we want to improve in this area, but we understand that it's going to be bounded by the ability, participation from, private property owners and limitations of funding and technology limitations and all sorts of things, right? We have outs in all these things. And that's why I'm just pointing at the word fully and saying, I don't know that this item should be absolute any more than any of the other items are absolute.
I think we heard from lots of folks, Donna, you missed it on the last task force meeting, that very, very strongly advocated for this. And I don't know, the point I would make is that there's a very, once land is gone, it's gone. there's a limited amount available. And, you know, I think, honestly, I think we owe it to our children to protect that open space as much as we can. And I think we
Yeah,
should.
I'm not
as a-
arguing at that,
as a
and I
task
know there
force,
was,
Make that statement.
I know there was a lot of discussion about this last time, so I'm not trying to go through all that again. I just wanted to know, like, if there was some additional benefit, because the original version that I was reading from, it did mention and carbon storage as part of N 1.1, so I see that was taken out.
Version.
I'm printing the one that Paul sent last, was that Friday or
Packet, in the packet.
in the packet? Yeah, this is the one I printed out from the packet. So there's already been some things added to it. Oh, it does say carbon storage. There it was. It was just hiding underneath our pictures.
Yeah, that was the original draft
And we should.
action.
Yeah, so, yeah, I think the resilience and the carbon storage, they go hand in hand, and the better, the more you can build a case for it, the better.
You know, the debate here is whether or not the existing protection for habitat blocks is something that we as a task force are comfortable with, or whether we want to recommend better protections for our open space. That's the debate, and you know, and all those protections will enhance the resiliency of our ecosystems and provide carbon storage. But it's a question of how much we think needs to be done, and how much this task force should recommend should be done.
Well, acknowledging too that there's pressures for other uses that are going to grow. And
There are, and
and-
those other committees can make that case.
Right. Well,
Well, some of those concerns are actually within the purview of this committee as well, right? We have concerns about dense housing, we have concerns about
Yeah,
adding, you know, renewable generation. There are other competing interests that we have that fall within the goals of the climate task force.
And I think we've indicated in here that we think that in the Transwell Overlay District, there should be really dense housing.
So one question to that point, Andrew, would be, we likely have at least some of those resources within our transit overlay district. Is that something that the task force feels should be resolved between these 2 points, or to just let each stand on their own? Because we may, you know, I think of parts of, say, Technology Park, they are likely wet meadows today in some form, you know, obviously surrounded by like FedEx and things like that, but they're also in our transit overlay district, as an example, and there's likely others. Is that something that the task force would like to try to resolve here, or just let each stand for their own?
It's a good question. That may be too much detail for this task force.
we're not gonna do it tonight, that's for sure.
Yeah, I'm just,
Is
you know, I think,
Bill, could you just, is Bill on?
I am.
What did the Natural Resource Committee say?
I sent it to you and to
did you
everybody
get
else.
the email?
I don't know, I
They
didn't get it.
strongly supported this.
I didn't get it. I didn't get the email.
Oh,
I didn't get it either.
I specifically made sure it was sent to you.
Yeah, I saw it. I saw it
got it.
today. It was just
Oh,
today.
yeah,
though.
I did.
I can read it out to you if you want, because it's
Please.
relatively short.
Good.
If you'll give me just a couple of minutes to read it. John Assange from the Natural Resources and Conservation Committee polled the members of the committee, and the members sent back their comments. And basically what they said was that the committee endorses the following positions taken by the climate crisis. Well, they said climate crisis task force: protect and conserve all remaining natural resources in South Burlington, except those protected by law, discourage the building of any more housing or commercial developments in the open fields and remaining natural spaces, follow the guidance spelled out in the city's comprehensive plan and illustrated on maps 7 and 8, as well as the recommendations in the Chittenden County Regional Plan, which call for smart growth development, and then take the steps needed to mitigate the climate crisis and reverse the destruction of the environment, and make those steps the most important recommendations from the task force. So some of them are specific, some of them are relatively general, but those are the recommendations that John was able to extract from the committee.
So is there clarity from either natural resources or from this group when that recommendation says no development on natural areas, something like what Paul described of a meadow that's in the middle of an industrial park, or we've got a lot that has one house on it and someone wants to build an accessory dwelling unit to do infill development in town. Are those areas which are dirt and grass and trees, are those part of the definition of natural
But it
resources as you see it?
But Ethan, it refers to smart growth development, which is exactly what you want to do in the transit overlay.
I agree, but it also
So
says,
they're saying that in their piece, so I think it's fine.
I'm just asking whether is there clarity around the definition of natural resources as it's defined there that makes it clear that it isn't in conflict with the development goals? Or is that something to be determined later by the DRB or something?
I thought they defined the natural resources by referring to the two maps.
Roseanne, you wanted to make a comment on this?
Yes, and it's a response to Donna was talking about the metrics for carbon. And one of the things that I would hope that this task force would learn about is what happens when you not only does the natural environment, the meadows, the wooded areas, the soil, not only does that store carbon, but when you disturb it, it releases the carbon that it has been storing. So it's a double whammy. It's no longer there to sequester more carbon, but it puts more carbon in the atmosphere when trees are cut down or soil is upturned, et cetera. So there is definitely a carbon impact on when lands, trees, meadows, et cetera, are disturbed or obliterated or destroyed. There are some metrics, if you want to put it to in how much it does. I've seen those. I mean, you could do some research if you wanted to find that out. But moreover, in addition to that, without those natural resources, when the climate impacts come to our area, the natural resource won't be there to prevent the flooding or soil erosion or the influx of insects coming in and diseases and stuff. So there are huge climate crisis direct consequences of preserving the natural resource lands or destroying them. So I really urge the task force to maybe get some more research on this, because it's out there and it's incredibly important. Even if you were to stop extracting and using fossil fuels, if you at the same time kept destroying nature, we're never going to, the planet will not survive. So that's what the science is saying. Okay.
I think I just want to clarify, because I don't see a problem with what's written on the right-hand column, as long as it says as permitted by law. So there's this question of taking, and so if that's covered under the as permitted by law, and we're not saying, well, we're not
That was
going
the intent.
to unduly take somebody's
not.
property,
Right.
then if that's clear and it can be made clear, I don't have a problem with this, and I think we should really move on from this.
Okay. Great.
Because I think there's probably been plenty of time spent on this.
Okay, I'm just flagging that, to be looked at some point is the possible conflict between transit overlay district smart growth and the existence of these resources. Had we had this conversation
Right.
5 years ago,
Right.
city center would have been that
Right.
exact issue.
Exactly.
And, I would hate for this to leave and to become, the part of the comprehensive plan. And then 3 years from now, this is a
Yeah.
massive debate
No,
of do we want
yeah.
a city center or not? I know that's a little bit of an extreme version, and I'm not trying to raise an extreme thing. I just don't want there to be internal conflict within what you're saying.
It should be clarified, yes.
Okay,
Great.
Can we
so,
move on?
No,
can I
This
just
is
say,
a strong statement. There's going to be some people who are going to be upset with this. Let's
Ethan,
move
can I
on.
suggest maybe get at least sort of a show of hands that folks would like to go with what Andrew has updated, just to sort of be, make sure that people got their words in for tonight.
Well, let's take out the word fully. Can
No.
we agree to take out fully?
No,
I agreed with Andrew on that one.
I did
Or
take
not
it
Andrew,
out.
with Ethan.
So you
Yeah.
have to,
That's the only
Fully's
thing I
already been
changed.
taken out.
Yeah, I took it out, but I can put it back.
I mean, I think
I think it's
fully,
just one word. I think.
Well,
it's-
you have to have, I think you have to have fully, because currently they are partially protected, not fully protected.
Yeah.
No, I think it's another one of those details to be figure out later on, exactly what do you mean by protected?
I mean, it's,
That's a definition, it's like protected, what does that mean? Fully protected doesn't mean anything better than protected.
Generally, it means no human encroachment, but let's not go there now.
but I mean, particularly given
That's
that we,
impossible, South Burlington is totally humanly encroached, so forget.
Well, it says
fully.
from further encroach, I mean, not.
I mean, this is a populated area, this is not wilderness.
But there's
Remember.
tons of South Burlington that's not encroached upon by human development. And those are the areas we're trying to protect.
I mean, if we agree that,
As fully as possible. I mean, I think you need more than, I'm not comfortable just leaving it honestly vague like that. I
To
mean,
protect I don't think to protect is vague. I think in some ways, it's permitting the discussion to happen, about what protection are you looking for? And it's not gonna be resolved tonight.
When is
And
it
we've
going to
done that
be
at-
resolved?
Yeah, we've done this everywhere else in these guidelines so far, it's like to be determined. This is,
well, we've done that for implementation, but not for policy.
well, no, I think a lot of our policies, we've said, we're gonna go as far as we think we can here. I don't think we have any other policies that say we're setting a bright line and we expect that there's gonna be 100% of anything on them. I don't think we'll find that we've asked for
right.
perfect compliance anywhere.
Yeah, because I really do believe as a architect who's been doing, high efficiency work and, sustainable work for a long time. You can take a site that's pretty, that's a habitat block. And, if you need to build something on that, it can be done in a way that will not create damage to that site.
That's
It's not gonna
impossible.
look- It's
That's
not gonna look,
impossible. That's
Wait.
impossible. I'm sorry, it's
Michael.
impossible.
listen,
No,
no, it's.
we're coming from a
it's
different
not
perspective. here,
It's
Donna.
not impossible. It wouldn't look like anything you're used to seeing, that's all.
We talking about like building
there
something
wouldn't- There
underground
wouldn't
or.
be parking. There would not be cars. There would not be parking. There would not be foundations. This would be built up into the air above.
Like a
space.
treehouse?
It's pole construction, but they do it all the time in very steep places,
But
in-
Donna, you can't
in
escape.
rainforests, they do
can't-
this in rainforests even to protect the environment. So I'm not like a absolutist when it comes to, oh, you can't ever do anything because that would be sacrilegious. It's, there are ways that things can be done when they have to be done. I'm not saying we should encourage it to be done, but when when there's no other way around it, there are going to be solutions that can be arrived at.
You guys are sinking into a philosophical issue that's not gonna get resolved tonight.
I know, that's
I
why I've
think
been
it's-
wanting to move on
We
to the
need to
next one.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that whatever you do, however sustainable and well designed it is, it will have some impervious aspect to it, and that means you're encroaching.
Can we take two motions here on this? One
yes,
with the
exactly.
word fully and one without, and however it comes out, it comes out.
Yes.
However the vote comes, it comes.
So what's the motion that we're,
Let's take one motion on these words in front of us.
That include fully.
Yeah.
How many people want that? Raise your hand.
I
Can
see,
anybody see us?
I see two. Andrew, I can't see you,
Oh,
so,
my hand is up.
My hand is up.
Yeah.
My hand
okay.
is up.
I see three.
Can you name the people, Ethan? It might be easier than just calling off.
Yeah, thank you. So I've got Andrew, Michael, Darrellyn. Those are the
This
three
is
in
just
favor
the
of that?
committee, correct?
How about Bill?
Lori, oh, sorry.
I think
That was Lori's hand.
to protect is sufficient.
So that's
Okay, so-
three in favor of that.
So 3 in favor
Okay.
and how many? I
So
think
that's
it's
not a pass, because
one,
it's your
two, 3,
group of
it's a
7.
tie, right? 1, 2, 3. It's 3 to 3, so it fails.
Does somebody want to suggest a different wording?
It's just taking out the word fully.
Take out fully.
Do you want to make a motion to that, Donna?
Yeah. That we would go with this language with the word fully removed as a motion.
Those in favor of the language on the screen? All in favor?
Oh, we can't see the whole screen. but-
Well, it's the red now.
All right, I see four.
Oh,
I see
okay.
Andrew, me, Bill, and Darrellyn. And Donna, I can't see you. Are you?
And Donna. Sorry.
Donna, so we've got
I'm
five.
over on the other side of the room waving.
I know, sorry, the camera was pretty far away. All right, so there we had five in favor of
got
the language.
six.
Yeah,
You got
okay.
six. You got
Six. Okay,
All right.
all right.
Okay.
Nothing like the interest of time to get a good vote.
Moving it right now. Reed.
Oh, boy. This one has an awful lot of stuff that doesn't really have to do with climate change. This has more to do with housing policy than it
Which
has
one are you talking about? Oh,
in 1.2. I mean, I agree with the first part, but everything else is really housing policy. I think if you sort of generalize that and instead just said, encourage, encourage more dense development on existing, to existing homes and neighborhoods or something. I don't know.
Can I just ask a question before we spend too much time wordsmithing this? And forgive my naivete about the process for how permitting and zoning and whatnot happen. What does encouragement mean? How would one proposal for a standalone single-family house and another proposal for a duplex or an add-on accessory dwelling be treated differently to have this mean something in policy?
Yeah, right.
so I guess there's two things. One would be enable, because some of these things cannot currently happen.
Okay,
And then encouragement might be, let's say, along the subject of an accessory apartment, they're allowed, but people don't really know how to do it. So a city could, put out a simple how-to guide, make it something that's really easy for folks to do. So that would be the encouragement part.
Well, I agree with it as a policy. I just don't really understand why it's in here.
Because it is a way to provide housing that doesn't destroy more natural space.
I would also add to Andrew's
You
point.
Put
that-
it in the transportation and land use area too.
Right,
you
I-
want.
Yeah, I mean, this one is really more buildings related, but I understand the decrease the pressure to build on undeveloped land.
I think that there's another component to it too, which relates to the transportation side, which is some of the other things that you talked about having parks within a certain distance, having stores within a certain distance, having
Right.
transit supportive needs, density of housing for those things to be viable. So it's
Exactly.
sort of, it reinforces the other things. If you had neighborhoods that had 1.5 times as many people living them, then you have a better chance of transit actually getting funded to serve that area.
Right.
So, I-
Exactly.
you know,
I
it's-
think
it's-
I move that we move this to the transportation and land use area
That's
Michael's
fine.
got
That
a,
makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah.
to increase density.
Yep, that makes sense.
Michael, did you, or was it, or is that covered you?
That, what I was going to say has already been corrected, and my comment in the right-hand column was in the wrong place. That's all.
Okay,
And I also tend to believe that I don't think you can tell people if they're gonna build an accessory use apartment, who they can and can't rent it to,
Correct.
right? Which I'm
I mean, the city's
I'm not
wrestling with
sure
that
what
right
that,
now, right?
what that
No,
meant.
rental.
I don't know if that's necessarily true, Don. I mean,
Oh.
Burlington is trying to cut down on Airbnbs.
I think when you mean short-term, that's not housing,
that's
that's,
from
that's
rentals.
considered,
Right, like
Hotel type things, like
Airbnb,
Airbnb.
Vrbo.
so a city can
Oh.
make a distinction between a stay of, say, longer than 30 days, which is sort of housing, versus 2 nights, which is kind of hotelish.
Okay, so
I think
it's,
that's what that comment was supposed to be.
That's what it's.
yeah, because I know that there were some programs that were discussed at Efficiency Vermont Conference that had to do with or money being allocated, but only if you rented to certain homeless people. And
Right,
I'm like,
that's-
oh my
No,
God.
this was really
I
about
know that-
short-term
I know
as
this is-
Airbnb, VRBO kind of
Hardly,
things, not,
Homeless.
Okay,
Well, assuming you can have a regulation that covers that, that doesn't really, I guess Burlington's working on it. I know
Are
several-
we on
I know
1.3
several
now?
people Depend on it for their income, so they're,
No, there's both sides.
they're
I get
quite,
Michael,
quite concerned about that.
Yeah,
yes.
I had a question about fertilizers, whether we were talking about every fertilizer or only those synthetic fertilizers that are made from fossil fuels, because I don't think it would be wise to eliminate all fertilizers.
Yeah, that's a good comment, right? Yeah.
What is it? I'm sorry, what does a voluntary ban mean? I was curious about what that looked like.
What do we
Uh,
do?
Right now, under Vermont law, at least, municipalities do not have the authority to ban pesticides because it's considered agriculture, and there's, this is a right to farm state. So not to say nothing else in this has been bounded by state, by our current authority, but that would be an uphill battle.
I guess I'm wondering if what we mean is that we want to encourage people to make a choice.
Well, you
We
could
know-
encourage associations to ban it within their own neighborhoods. So that would be a voluntary ban.
Oh, so
Just giving an idea,
just that a city can't ban it.
right?
It's like the high mow thing, the 4-inch.
Right.
You can't require it, but we are encouraging it.
Or no Monet. I had to stop my
I can't do that because I'm so concerned I'll get Lyme again.
oh, the guy was there cutting and he started us while I'm like, no, stop.
Right, next.
Those seem pretty good.
I'm sorry, did we skip over 1.3 or is that just because everyone's happy with 1.3? That's a new,
Yeah.
Yeah, I was asking that question. Are-
fine.
Did we skip something?
Did
Yeah,
you
well-
skip
I
down
think
at
you
all,
skipped
Ann?
over 1.5.
1.6 is, I had a note.
let's do 1.5 first.
Does it,
Can you not see 1.5?
We can.
Now you can, yes.
Yeah, now we. Yeah, I think I might have sent you, I don't know if you got the comments that I sent to Ann, but I think on this one, I think the specific types of trees have to be prioritized that are long-lived. Because an awful lot of associations put in trees that grow fast, but then they're not great for carbon sequestration because they don't last very long.
the city of South Burlington puts in short-lived trees.
Well, that's partly because they're street trees.
Yeah,
And street trees, you can't really plant too many kinds of oak trees as street trees, pin oaks.
I know, but that's why they're
Don't-
all.
But you need, but don't we want to encourage native, because again, I mean, I obviously know we need to have as much carbon sequestration as possible. You also need biodiversity, right, for
Right, you do.
resilience. So is it doesn't native tree canopy kind of cover it?
Yes.
Well,
Yeah, I think you want native trees because if you change to trees that aren't native, you do an ecosystem that survives on the native.
or,
That's it.
or trees that will become native because, you know, obviously,
Well, yeah, we might be like
Obviously-
Virginia, it's true.
obviously the climate's changing, so what's native is gonna be changing over time.
That's true too.
The other piece is that, managed forest versus just, you know, unmanaged forest. Because, I mean, there's a lot of evidence that, thinning a little bit of trees to allow many trees to grow larger is
Yes,
actually better for sequestration. And I think a forester would know that, a tree specialist would know that. But I just want to make sure that, you know, we're relying on this knowledge in promoting tree canopy. It's, you know, just leaving forests grow the way they are isn't necessarily going to give you the best forest or tree canopy.
I think we should incorporate your comment about the changing climate. You're right, 1.5. It should say something like increased native tree canopy to take into account, you know, what the climate will be like when those trees mature. Something like that.
So we've got Michael, you've got your hand up.
It's just about the next point. Let's finish.
Okay.
1.5 first.
And then Roseanne had asked to make a comment on street trees.
Yes, I've been working with the city arborist for the past year or so on, especially on street trees. And so the thing that the city of South Burlington has, and the city arborist have identified is the most important thing is different varieties and species of trees. The monocultures are causing very grave concerns, like the emerald ash borer.
right.
And our street has all ash trees. So what the city is trying to do is they're not talking about native trees, although they are, but a different mix of trees, so that you have some oaks, some river birch, some horse chestnuts, so that the city doesn't have, you know, an overabundance of one species. So it's more than just native. It's a diversification of species. So I suggest, well, whatever. I mean, the city is sort of on top of this.
Yeah.
The city
this item-
arborist.
Well, and the city is mainly concerned with street trees. And I think this is both of these go beyond that. We're talking about really increasing the number of trees in places where it might be just grass or yards and even parts of our parks.
Rebuilding forests.
Even,
yeah.
yeah, and even parts of our
Right.
parks, but there's no reason that needs to
Reforestation.
be open. Yeah.
Yeah.
We can take
Plant as many
advice.
trees as
We can
possible.
take advice on this issue from the Chittenden County forester, who
Definitely.
knows exactly what a wild forest should look like.
Well, I guess I would suggest that there's really two subject areas here. There's forests and there's tree canopies. And a tree canopy can serve a lot of benefits for a heat island effect
Right,
that is not necessarily a habitat issue.
right.
Reforesting a neighborhood or adding trees into a neighborhood that has very few trees is not necessarily forest restoration,
Obviously.
but it may be it may have other benefits. So
Oh, it
I,
has some huge benefits.
right,
you know, like,
I just want to make sure that we're not saying, that
Right.
we want to be, thoughtful that trees aren't always have major areas of habitat, but they can be greening. And that's what a canopy is typically doing
Right.
as opposed to a habitat area.
and on one
Ted and I
point.
have planted 130 trees.
Was that?
Ted and I have planted 130 trees.
That's a
on our
forest.
property. You don't have to mow so much,
Well, that's a good contribution towards the billion that we need, right?
Yeah.
Trillion, I think we need a trillion.
Well, yeah, I think even maybe even mention specifically the cooling effect of having trees around buildings,
Oh, yeah.
you know, and particularly parking lots and, well, we know about parking lots and streets, but, you know, people often don't plant houses or trees next to their house because they don't like to rake leaves and they like lawns. But that's a culture that's gonna have to change a little,
So
you know, to accept having a lot more trees.
partly in the interest of time, but also to try to be somewhat symmetrical to how we approach some of the other sections. I feel like we're at risk of sort of getting way down, not to pun, but in the weeds here
No, I think
on this one. And I wonder if we can keep
Yeah.
the advice somewhat at the level of, we're concerned about this, we want to enlist experts and we want to take some action. And is that enough detail without spending more time here? Or are there other like really key things that we're missing?
I still have, as to Paul's comment about, you know, these are on private property should probably not be, should be deleted in under 1.5. Because it'll be on public roads and public property as well.
I think the
It's
point of
providing
this one,
education and outreach.
yeah,
Why
I
would
think,
private property owner want to know that?
I think this one is geared towards private property owners to increase the canopy in areas not just managed by the city.
Well, and what about the streets and the other areas, parks and so on that are managed by the city? Are we going to ask encourage the city to retain and increase? Oops.
Yeah, I don't think we have one in there specifically for the city.
Why don't we say private and public?
section.
Private and public property.
That's fine.
Okay.
I think that's good. Let's move
Yeah.
on.
And 1.6 was just a comment that I thought we might want to add. You know,
Sorry,
yeah.
Michael, I'm not familiar with that acronym. I'm not NRP.
We don't have to use that exact language, but the idea is to encourage private landowners, not necessarily only on NRP, but you know,
What does NRP stand for?
natural resource protection lands.
Thank you.
They've already zoned in a way that they can't build on it or develop on it, but we could sure benefit from additional forestry.
Are there any federal programs? Because man alive, I think 60 years ago, the feds, my in-laws planted, I don't know how many thousand trees. And they were given these little saplings and a lot of people did. You know, you look at some of the big properties and they have lines of fir trees. Well, that was a federal program and they were free.
Oh, wow. Well, if you just like stop mowing the fields, it'll.
Yeah, but you don't always get fast growing.
Yeah, you don't always get a
You
nice
get
forest, but
I mean, it was
So
a
presumably
wonderful
these are
program.
implementation?
I was actually thinking particularly about hardwoods.
Okay, so
So can we, sorry to move, it's 9:08. Can we kick that to the implementation phase to figure out exactly which variety of tree, who pays for them and how they get distributed?
Sure,
yes.
sure.
That's fine.
Maybe there's some federal programs still. I don't know.
Okay,
I mean, to help pay for it.
So what's 1.67 about?
Is that supposed to be 1.7?
Sorry about that.
No problem.
Pursue easements or trails.
Not really a climate change.
Yeah, that's
thing.
not really,
I mean, I agree with it. It's not really a climate change thing, though.
I don't think
No, I don't
so.
think it is either.
No. It's not really.
I
I
would.
think we should
nix
kill
it.
that.
Yeah.
Let's just delete it.
It could
No,
only
I
be,
agree with it as a policy. It just doesn't really belong here. but-
Yeah, I guess my suggestion would be, the biggest challenge that you're gonna have with this climate action plan at the end of it is that you're gonna have a lot of different actions and you're gonna have to pick which ones to do. So if something like this just obviously, if you can narrow by 5, then you don't have 100, you've got 95
Well,
things.
a
and
lot of
that's-
them are related,
Yeah.
which.
Yeah,
this
no, I'm
format-
just,
this
I'm just making
format
the case
doesn't-
that maybe deleting this
Yeah,
one.
Yeah,
this-
delete it.
I think
Yeah,
I would delete
yeah,
it.
we're
But
all
to your
agreeing
point,
just
Paul, I
delete
think
this one.
we'll be able to identify like 2 or 3 that are really, really important and the rest.
A lot of them are related to each other, and it's only this format that makes it look like we have that many.
Yeah, I think that's probably right.
Because a lot of these are very closely related.
Okay, so now we're going on to solid waste district, reduce municipal and construction waste.
So, did you not get any of the comments I sent to you last week? Because I made a real statement about this one.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realize it was about this one.
Well,
You
I-
sent
I
an
numbered-
email.
I numbered which ones they were about. But
Oh, I'm
anyway,
sorry, didn't catch that.
I just think this has to be a lot more specific. It's just let's see, where is it? Yeah, reduce municipal and construction waste. I'm like, okay, that sounds nice, but it's not really an idea. It's like, my idea was to make it very specific and say, reduce trash pickup citywide to once per every 2 weeks, along with public campaign to reduce waste in packaging.
We
and-
already have something about reducing pickup traffic in transportation.
We do. We have
Well,
that in
but
transportation.
again, it's very general. It just said, oh, coordinate them. But it didn't say about actually reducing the number of pickups. It just said coordinate them. Which I think in this one, it would be good to have at least a discussion point that means something other than just, oh, we're gonna reduce trash. If you pick up half as often, it generally means that people are more conscious about how much stuff they're throwing away. It's like, I have no idea why anybody would need to have trash picked up every week. Unless you're getting packages from Amazon, 4 times a week. I just don't see how anybody can generate that much trash.
Well, it would depend on the size of the family too.
It's a lot of trash in 2 bins. That's a lot of
I'm
trash,
not disagreeing with you that we waste so much
right?
on
I'm
packaging.
just saying, let's just give a specific idea.
So-
I'm just suggesting.
That's a good idea.
Let's add a specific idea, to at least put some teeth into it.
It's a good idea.
So wait, so the teeth you're suggesting is put a mandatory cap on the quantity of cash per person that someone can get picked up.
Gonna need a lot more cleanup day volunteers.
No, I'm just.
Or just make them
just
drive to
saying
the transfer station if they want to do more than that, make it illegal to have a commercial hauler pick it up. They have to bring it themselves.
If you really have an awful lot of stuff, then maybe you need a different solution there, but as a citywide thing, I don't think we need to have trash pickup every week.
Can somebody tell me what item number we're on?
Any 1.1.
Okay.
I mean, so again, I'm hoping we can sort of strike a difference. I hear what you're saying, Donna, about being specific so that we don't have something that someone can say like, oh, I didn't throw this paper clip out, and so we met the action. But I also understand that implementation plan, once again, is supposed to be where we would get down to the details of exactly how we're going to make it happen. So are there ways that we can?
Well, we've done it in every other place, so it just seems like having a real specific idea here, putting a specific idea instead of a very general, oh, would like to, seems like it's a little more effective.
So the specific idea is to put limitations on the amount of commercial trash hauling that is permitted on city streets.
No, I just said to have trash pickup every other week. Just to not have trash
That
pickups
seems
every
really
week.
sensible. I like that. Every other week pickup. Why do you need every week pickup?
We know, we have every other
I
week.
mean, we're a big family and I don't need every week.
A lot of people don't even know that you can get it picked up every other week and it's cheaper.
Yeah.
I would
have
say,
it
except
every
like
other
around the
week.
holidays,
In my
sometimes.
little
Well-
association, we have it every other week.
Or
by
something.
We have the recycles every other week.
Yeah.
They don't come every week.
It does come in much of the city every week, so I'm just suggesting that.
Okay, let's
let's put that in then and move on.
Okay. Consider a green investment policy. Is that for the city to consider?
Yes.
So yeah,
the-
what's
this
This
next
is government.
category,
Okay,
this
is
next
GM.
category becomes municipal operations. So this is
Yep.
the city as a corporate entity
Yep,
is all
got
of
it,
these.
okay.
The only thing I have to say about the next three is why is it considered? Why shouldn't we just say the city should adopt? City should, like for all three of these, the city may not, but as a climate action task force,
We should tell them
why
that.
why are we only recommending to
Adopt a
consider?
green investment policy, adopt a green
Yeah.
purchasing policy.
Yep,
Exactly.
So,
yep.
In fact, I think we have a green purchasing policy. And, you know, but it isn't like we only purchase something green. You have to go through this weighing it, yeah.
Makes sense. Okay, adopt a green operations policy again, right?
Yes, good.
Yeah, raise, include the preparation of city natural areas management plans.
I'm not really sure what this one means,
no, I was
but
gonna say the same. What does that mean?
I'll tell you, this got quite a rise out of the bike ped committee though, because I think you may understand why, because, you know, it's like, there is no good substitute for an asphalt pathway when it comes to bike and ped use, you know, and that trying to say you can't pave in a natural area, i.e.
that.
Hubbard Park or, you know, crossing at the end of Swift Street eventually, those really do have to have a maintainable pavement
Well, I
that's year
disagree with the
round.
Hubbard Park thing,
Well,
but
so
okay.
without going into the really super specifics, I think what something like this would be saying is, as you're putting together a management plan, consider climate resiliency. So Donna, you talked earlier about thinning of trees might help growth long-term.
Right.
On the stormwater side, it may be, we're projecting a lot more rainwater. We're gonna have to take a portion of this natural area and have a stormwater facility in it. Maybe we move trails so that they're not, you know, erosion prone if we're gonna see more rainfall. I think there's a lot of things that could come out of
Yeah.
this. And the statement is just, think about our climate future as
Right.
we are developing a
Right.
management plan, not down to the hyper specific of exactly what any
Yeah.
That
individual.
makes sense the way.
Oh, there we go. It's
Andrew's
And I think that
management
sounds fine. Yeah.
include, not just consider, include climate resilience. Well, I guess considers okay.
No,
I think
this looks-
consider-
Considers okay there, yeah.
Yeah, no, that was good.
Include,
Either one.
Either one's fine.
yeah, not either one.
Okay,
Okay, we're good.
good.
Okay.
Thank you, Ann.
install Solar and micro.
Yeah, that's already been working on it.
turbine At the waste, well, we're already planning
Yeah.
that. Include.
Okay.
Well, we're gonna be planning for a new upgrade in the wastewater treatment, aren't we?
Right,
So
GO
we would
two
be
point two
doing
is
that.
underway right
So,
now. to do
yeah,
Exactly
The
that.
plan is underway, so that, this is good to have in there.
Well, and I guess operational efficiency, so how much fossil fuel is used in the wastewater treatment plant is the question. Yeah, because
Well, they use a ton of electricity.
I know they use a
Right.
lot of electricity. I just don't know. I mean, they probably generate some.
Well, they're working on it. They're, it's
There's a-
just very much in the forefront
There's a
of,
lot of natural gas used in the digester.
yeah.
Okay, yeah.
What we've been told by Lou,
Does
It's
it look
already
like?
planned, why don't we just move on?
yeah, Lou has said
Okay.
that they're trying to get the most aggressive possible solutions out of the engineers, so.
Okay,
I'm pretty confident.
sounds
that
good.
we're doing that. Determine.
How would you actually share EV assets with another town? I'm not really clear on how you would even do that.
So if they need to use the EV, they drive over to our town and pick it up. And then when we need it again, we drive over to their town and pick it up.
Oh, it's a
But then you're
mobile
driving,
unit?
but then you're having to drive an extra trip just to pick it up. That's silly.
I'm joking.
You have to walk each way.
Okay.
Take one of the city bikes.
Yeah.
Well, there is some money, I believe it's still in the state budget to pay for some EV assets along, what is it, 89 and Route 7?
Yes.
That's charging stations, which I think we've got under transportation.
Yeah,
Oh,
the-
right.
The only thing that occurs to me that might fit within this is I think in the past, we've talked about having heavy equipment that's used infrequently. So not snowplows where everyone needs it on the same day, but if you've got a backhoe, if someone can buy an electric backhoe, we don't all need it on the same day.
I guess my suggestion would be to remove the first sentence in red, because the question of whether you share facilities, share assets is really not a climate question. The question that you're posing is turn the fleet to be
Right,
EV.
right,
Whether we share the equipment or we don't share the equipment isn't in and of itself a climate item.
right.
Well, embodied carbon, but yeah.
That's a process or something, yeah. Okay.
Well, and it's just a financial issue.
Yeah,
Not everybody has to buy it.
Well, right, but
We don't have
yes,
to,
but
we don't
then
have
it
to,
becomes a use and financial issue. How often is one town using it? Do they need it at the
Right.
same time?
Right.
Yeah, and I think that's really being a partner with our neighboring communities generally on all things, not just EV.
Mhm.
We borrow Williston's grader, for example, for
Yeah.
our one dirt road in town, because it doesn't make sense for us to have our own to do that.
That
Or
makes
maybe we
sense.
just
And
have
there's-
them do it for us.
This GO is really, the city side, but the school has their own process and they're buying electric buses and, I mean, they have goals as well, which probably, I don't know how you incorporated this without sort of taking it over, but they are doing stuff. We should somehow reflect that in this.
Well, there's also towns that are sharing public and school buses are all the same. They're the same buses. They don't separate them.
Yeah.
my understanding was last time we started to talk about mandating or putting things in here that tell the school what to do, that
Right.
was, I think,
Doesn't work.
considered to be sort of in the same category of also saying like,
Right.
we think that the mall should do this one specific
Right.
thing. We think that building, it was too specific.
No, that wasn't a suggestion.
Well, I think my suggestion might
We're
be
good.
to engage the school district to include under this portion of our energy plan, what they are doing or would commit to do. I mean, because we're not, they live here too. I mean, they're throwing carbon into the air as well, so we need to jointly work on this. And they are doing some things, so I think they have some
That's good.
items that they can.
I mean, if that's something that
I
the city's
think
able to
Ann
do with
got
the
it.
school,
I think
Then
Ann
that's
got
great.
it. That's a good one.
we were just under the impression that it was off the table.
Well, I keep mentioning it to David, but he's gone in a month, so. We'll be the boy, was it Boyer? She's the new one.
Okay, move on.
So just, I know this is municipal, but did we address small engines anywhere else? Because, right, I mean, I don't know if city has the power to,
Yes, 2.5 is to replace gas-powered small engine equipment with electric.
No, is that just municipal stuff or is that citywide?
That would just be municipal.
Right, and I just don't recall if we addressed citywide anywhere else in this.
Oh, like a personally,
Right.
that-
Yeah, like an ordinance says you
Yeah.
can't use gas powered motors anymore, gas powered blowers.
Looks
We
like
didn't, I thought
Michael added some comments.
No,
over
I
in
know we did, I'm just saying, but this section is about
It's about
municipal stuff.
Right.
And I don't recall whether somewhere else we talked about small engine, non-municipal stuff. And if we didn't, we probably should.
So that's a note for Ann to.
Right, I
So
guess,
I-
can be added.
I don't believe there is anywhere because it's not a thermal thing, it's not a transportation thing.
Oh, it's not transportation. that's
As
right.
a broad statement, you had a public comment at the beginning of the last meeting of somebody who suggested, maybe there's a campaign where folks can say, here's what I've done as a household. There's a whole bunch of things that I think aren't really captured in here that are really at the household individual level. Plant a couple of
Right.
trees in your backyard, or don't mow your lawn, or plant a community garden in your backyard. These are all really important, wonderful things. Maybe they can all go into one category of, encourage and incentivize homeowners or residents to take small daily actions.
I agree with both of that, but the thing about leaf blowers is, I mean, that is kind of catching on across the country as actual regulatory matter.
Yeah.
Like to not,
This-
allow
right.
gas blowers.
That one would have to be, the legislature would have to enable us to be able to. do
Okay, so
something.
we don't have the authority.
So we didn't ask Burlington about that, but Burlington has banned them. Did they also have to get a charter change? Do you know?
They banned them?
Yes.
I'm pretty sure they did, yeah.
I
Yeah.
think a
I
number
think they did.
As of July this year,
Maybe we have authority. I just, as a diligence rule state, I've
It'd
never
be
heard
good
of
to
it before,
ban.
so.
I hate them.
Yeah, and I see this
That's
as
why we
being,
would ban them.
Why don't-
and I see this less about the household use of someone who, 20 minutes twice a year uses them, and more about the crews that have 3 guys with leaf blowers that are working 8 hours a day for weeks and weeks.
Mhm.
That's where we need to
Yeah.
intervene.
Well, or lawnmowers, which is a huge amount daily for.
Yeah, Burlington banned them from.
Okay, so I may be wrong with my statement there. I apologize.
Yeah, I mean, I think for lawnmowers, if we're going to talk about regulations, we could at least get 4-stroke instead of 2-stroke, but it's down in the weeds. Michael, what was your?
I was going to say that other states have done it, and here's one more case where we should ask the city attorney whether the city can in fact impose these kinds of restrictions that you can't replace. If you replace these machines, you have to replace them with non-fossil fuel or electric battery operated ones. And there are a lot of incentives for both commercial and personal. And I sent Melanie and I think I sent a link to an outfit called Mo Electric, and they list all the utilities and what the incentive is. For example, for a commercial lawnmower, it's $1,000, I think, something like that. But there may be more than one. So we should find out whether we can do this. If we can't do it, scrap it. But if we can, let's make it as strong as we possibly can.
Burlington
Yeah, I agree.
passed it, June 2nd of last year, June 2nd, 2021.
So two comments, Michael, on that. So one is, I think the building related ordinances around doing things on replacement is a reasonable intervention point, because people have to go to the town and get permission to do a thing to their building. But I think that when you can buy it over the internet or drive to another town and buy it, it doesn't really have any teeth to say on replacement. I think that's why the prohibitions have been on owning and using it, or really on using it. I suppose if you want to keep one around for posterity, because it's friends.
Well, yeah, maybe we could go to Home Depot and Lowe's and all the rest of the people who are selling most of these things and say, don't sell any new gas-powered mowers and leaf blowers and.
Right, and Plattsburgh and all the rest. But I think the other issue is if it's going to be against use, then we need enforcement, because I'm going to tell you that Burlington still has people using them, and I don't know what the enforcement mechanism is, but
their ban
That may
only
be-
begins July 1st.
They
okay.
may be using them, but once they have to buy a new one.
Well,
they
there,
should be able to. I think the key is not being able to replace a gas-powered one with another gas-powered one.
I just don't know how we enforce it when there's mail order companies.
You know what? I mean, we can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, right? You don't necessarily need to enforce all this. Realize that we obviously are not going to make a dent in the global climate budget. What we're trying to do is lead, put out rules that show we're a leader, try to have other people follow us and try and send people to move in the right direction. So, you know, it's not like, prohibiting murder, right? I mean, we're just trying to do the right thing. I don't know.
Yeah, we should say why we want, we should persuade or say, to explain to people why we want them to do this, and then point them to the incentives that are available.
I think if we get something that's pretty good for this purpose is like a real win.
In this instance, Burlington uses the word use, not sale. It's an interesting question. I'm not sure that there's a lot of things in this country other than Kinder Surprises that are illegal to buy.
I love that example.
Interesting area of law.
Somebody
I
mentioned.
don't know, it'd be interesting to know if we can do something like this. If we can't, then we just move on. Maybe they have special authority.
Well, I think that you can educate and encourage.
Yeah, of course.
Basically, that's what you can do.
Look, for the most part,
And they're
Lowe's and Home
available.
Depot, it's all electric now.
They're
There's
available
hardly
now.
any gas stuff.
Somebody mentioned that most of the pollution from these kinds of small engines come from professional landscaping companies. And, I see it right here in my own development. So those people have to have a license to operate in South Burlington,
They do.
No, they don't.
or they have to have.
There is no requirement for any registration other than they have to be registered with the Secretary of State if they're a business.
Yeah.
Let's move on from this. Let's see if we can get through all these actions and be done with this.
Yeah, I've got a dog I have to.
On 2.6, just one little technical thing, just say with energy efficiency, with the highest efficiency light sources.
Can we just
Don't
say
ever
LED?
use the word bulbs.
Can we just say LEDs?
No, because there will always be changes. Every time they said fluorescent, they thought, oh, that's the best, we're HID, there's always something gonna be better. So the highest,
Okay, next.
Can that also have the word reduction added to it?
just light sources, take fixtures off.
Complete replacement and reduction of all streetlights?
That's a
No.
massively big debate.
That's a safety issue.
No.
Sorry, Charlie.
You will have exactly half the people strongly opinionated on both sides of that particular subject of levels of lighting.
I think we could talk about dimming levels, but
Utilize.
That would be such a long conversation. I think we would probably get more reduction in carbon if we focus somewhere else.
Yeah, you get almost no reduction in
You know
carbon
what I
in that
mean?
measure anyway.
Because it's
Because
largely
we
on
gotta
the
do 3 or
electric
4 of
grid
these
anyway.
to begin with.
Right.
Okay,
Let's start with streetlights.
Well,
2.7.
2.7.
Okay.
I mean, I don't know to what extent this has already been attempted.
it's, we're actively working on it. Lou is always working on this stuff. I'm sure there are ways that it could get done faster and that we could put more resources towards it. There's always limitations, but
Yeah, it's worth
Yeah.
keeping on there.
And the new buildings are in good shape as well.
Well, I don't know if it goes here or not, but there is another special fund that the legislature created to, that municipalities can apply for to make their buildings energy efficient. And we have 2 that are in line for that. And I think you're applying, so, I mean, keep it
Yeah.
in there. We're going for the grants. But this may be something we really can accomplish.
Okay.
So that would be.
Oh, what does that mean exactly?
What, 2.9? Not
I
having,
mean, frankly, I think what that means is it becomes a key part of the city's comprehensive plan so that as the city is prioritizing work, it's a piece of overall prioritization. It's a lens through which along with the other ones, is looked at for all things. I think that's what that basically says.
Right, and the council asked you to do that anyway.
Right.
I mean, there was already a direction. Continue to protect river and all.
Well, that's kind of a repeat of other items that are on the transportation.
Right, but this one
This
is,
is just
this
specific
is,
to the
this is the city as a as a corporate entity now, so it's,
Okay.
it's
Right,
it's
so
the
the
city, not as a
employees
policy.
of-
Employer.
Oh, okay.
Okay, now the blue section is adaptation and resilience. So that's no longer city operations. Do you guys want to keep going?
Yeah, I was gonna ask, you know,
I've
so.
got to leave, so, but I can't vote
I think it
anyway.
makes sense to pause here.
We'll do it.
Yeah, one question's about pausing and the other question is about whether there are at least a subset of questions about the engagement plan that we need to address tonight. You know, Paul, are there like the first one or two items that need or are scheduled to be started before our next meeting, or that you need to do some planning on before the next meeting that you'd like to get sign off from us?
I think so, just in 30 seconds, I sent this sort of chart showing how we would like to coordinate efforts of the climate action plan, the ARPA outreach, and the comprehensive plan. Within the resources that are available, we're trying to hit a variety of different groups by doing a poll. We'll probably have two polls, one about ARPA and the comp plan and one about climate action, so we don't have one really long one that is too hard to follow. And what would be really helpful from you all, from the Energy Committee and others, is we'd like to, at some strategic events this summer, do some tabling conversations, that kind of thing. Some of them will be at a really big event, some of them might be at some smaller events, but where we might have a better chance for conversation, like the rec department does barbecues with in coordination with the Champlain Housing Trust for all the folks who live on Farrell Street. That would be a really great way to contact people that we otherwise almost never hear from and have some really good one-on-one conversations. So that's sort of my brief spiel on it. I don't think I need any huge action yet, except that I have sort of offered Ethan up as part of the intro to the poll, to an online poll, to give a little like 3 or 4 minute little intro video, because to Darylyn's point, we can't just throw up and say, throw a chart of here's 80 things, what do you think about it? It's really more of this, you start the getting input by education. So, you know, what are we trying to do? How is this a shared thing of all of ours? We're breaking it into these 3 or 4 buckets and have done a lot of thought on how to do it, but we need your ideas too. What's your best idea? And if you really want to engage, here's how to do it, that kind of thing.
Those people that submitted letters, the ones that you sent out, were they? I mean, some of them were students, but it sounded like some of them were just general people in the
They
community.
were in this week, they were all students in that class.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, they just described themselves as however they want to describe themselves.
I got in touch with the professor. I'm going to follow up and talk to him more about understanding sort of where that came from and what other ways that he might have ideas about how the university can provide some outreach and support with that. So Paul, just really briefly, I'm all in on helping out whatever way I can. Recording a video is great. And I also wanted to share that the tabling and conversations is something that the Energy Committee actually talked about last night, that they would like to volunteer to help staff some of those. We've got a tent and a banner and a whole bunch of things, and the Energy Committee is up for coordinating with you and making sure that we can get really good involvement.
Great, thank you. And continue to do all the great work that the Energy Committee already does with its Facebook page of putting out really positive news almost daily about things people can be doing. That's so valuable. So thank you to them, for whoever the person behind all that is.
Who is doing that?
Keith Epstein is a lot of it, but there are other people too. I know Andrew, you've helped out with some of it, and MJ's working on some of it, and we all throw in things sometimes. But
I don't see enough thumbs though, and positives.
I try to like
Responses.
each
I don't
one.
know how many people, I don't know how many people are getting that. But
No, he has metrics. It's a fair distribution.
Oh, good. Just can't tell that on Facebook.
Yeah.
Yeah, and obviously, Paul, the Energy Committee is also happy to promote the poll, the survey you put out there. And I have some starting points for.
Use this consensus app? You used to have this app.
That was, right, that was a beta test that that expired, but I heard this week that we might be back at it in a few months.
Way to poll the city.
Yeah.
That's good.
Did we get a lot of participation through it?
I'm not 100% sure. I know it was really sort of a beta test, but so I don't know how much sort of really big push it happened, but it's a really cool tool. I just heard about it for the first time this week in a year and a half, so I'll follow up and let you guys know.
I signed up to use it, but I didn't often get around to clicking the buttons.
I remember when I used it, I thought that, because it would tell you how many people responded, it wasn't trivial. I think it was, it was pretty well used.
So, Paul, sounds like you're in good shape, and maybe if folks want to submit any ideas or volunteering to help out with specific pieces, we should just send you email directly to.
Yeah, we do, and once we have the dates finalized, I don't think we need to do anything formal, but I'd love to get anyone who's willing to volunteer and just be part of the conversations, because I think that's going to be a big part of at least the in-person stuff. And the last thing I'll say on it is that we really tried within the resources that exist to think about how do we communicate with people who are not otherwise bringing themselves to the table, with a big emphasis on that, which is not an easy thing to do at limited resources, but there are some ways to do it. Tonight, one of them is to partner with the library. There's a whole user group that participates in all sorts of things with the library that has nothing to do with anything else that the city does. That's an untapped resource that is, there's a physical place where people go. So we're pretty excited about that.
Different groups of people or just one?
Lots
group people?
of different groups of people,
Lots of different groups.
Yeah, every day after school, I see all sorts of parents bringing their kids from the elementary school of let's go get a book. And
That's
there's
great.
lots of different groups that aren't a uniform set of that box, which is really nice. It's one of the few places that we can, get a cross section of the community, which is really neat.
Right.
Great.
And then we got a lot of sets of minutes for you to approve if you're ready.
Yeah, I think it would be great if we could crank through these so we're not so far out of whack. Does anyone, just as a blanket before we just vote-o-rama this, does anyone have any issues with the minutes or corrections that they want to offer?
No.
And I'd love to run through the vote, but the city's server, because I kept the minutes open so long, the city thinks I'm doing a denial of service attack on it. And so it has banned me from getting access to the agenda in minutes.
Well, why don't I move to approve the minutes of March the 10th, March the 30th, April the 14th, April the 27th, 2022.
I second that motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Abstains? All right.
Thank you,
Approved as-
everyone.
Thanks everyone for staying late.
Thank
Good
you.
meeting.
Is it late?
Yeah.
A little
You
bit.
guys are doing great work. Thank you.
Thank you, Laurie.
Thanks, Laurie.